All right, we're here, everybody. Get ready for CoCoTALK. Going live in 3, 2, 1. CoCoTALK is an unscripted live broadcast. Anything can and will happen. The views and opinions expressed by members of the panel and the live audience are their own and not necessarily those of the CoCoTALK show, its sponsors, affiliates, or subsidiaries. Open minds encouraged, sense of humor recommended. If any off-color comments were made, we're sorry.
Hi, this is Dale Lear, designer of TRS-80 Color Baseball, and you're listening to CoCoTALK.
This is CoCoTALK, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy Color computer. It's time to drop your socks and grab your real-time clocks, and let's rock.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
All right, everybody, we are here with CoCoTALK episode 123. The main topic today is going to be the CoCo community and its evolvement. Are you ready? Have you got anything better to do today?
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
All righty then, we are here. Everyone, welcome, one and all, children, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. We're here with another live episode of CoCoTALK, the world's leading live podcast featuring the Tandy Color computer. The only live talk show in the history of the Tandy Color computer. And what can I say? It's one of my personal favorites. We got a great panel here today. We've got all kinds of people from all kinds of places. We've got live chat going on right now, people chatting. Let's start in the top left-hand corner of our panel. We're just going to introduce ourselves by names. We'll get into some other things later in the show. But how about we start with our streaming engineer, the guy who makes the show possible whenever I'm not available to, and he's just a damn well-dressed guy, too, in his Radio Shack shirt. How about Mr. Mark Bosley in the house? How are you today, Mark?
Hello, doing good.
Welcome to the program. So glad you could make it. You didn't have anything better to do today, apparently. So we're glad that you are here. We've also got a guy who's wearing another nice shirt. He's wearing a CoCoTALK shirt. I like that shirt, Mark D. Overholzer, our resident Apple guy. How you doing, Mark D.?
I'm doing fine. Glad to be here.
We are glad to have you. We've got a person who's been with the CoCo community for at least a couple of weeks now. I think he knows a thing or two about the past and the present of the CoCo community. Mr. Thank You, You're Too Kind. Mr. Rick Adams is with us. Hello, Rick.
Thank you, and thank you. You're too kind. Okay.
Now,
hello, everyone.
We got a guy who's got more sponsorships going on back there. I think you need another logo. It's like a NASCAR or something. He's walking the red carpet or one of these things going back here. So he's got the Tandy Color computer, the TDPs, the Tandy Shack, the CoCoTALK Live. He's wearing a Radio Shack t-shirt. And what kind of hat you got there, too? Is that a Commodore hat?
That's Wyoming.
Wyoming. All right. Terry Steggy's in the house.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good. There's no product placement on this show. We'll have you know, right? Unless it's Terry Steggy's.
I'm going to delete myself and put something else there.
Now, we have not had the pleasure of his company in quite some time, and the news world has suffered for it. But from Canada, it is L. Curtis Boyle. Welcome back, Curtis.
Hello, everyone. So I'm a little bit tired from all the overtime I've worked in the last couple of weeks, so if I pause unnecessarily and nod off, you'll know why.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you. The world of news has missed your correspondence and your anchorage. So welcome back, L. Curtis. We got the guy who brought us live breaking coverage from the Radio Shack store. And he's also wearing a very sharp shirt there. Mr. Joe Burnett. Welcome back, Joe.
Hey, guys. How's it doing?
Good. Great to have you. I love that shirt. We got a man whose name is so nice, we must say it thrice. Fellow Canadian who pronounces it Cador. Nick Marotta, Nick Marotta, Nick Marotta.
Hello, good afternoon. This is definitely a highlight of my week, and that is how sad my life has become.
Well, I can echo that sentiment. The guy who's usually got things that he's picked up along the way that makes us all jealous, he's here to join us. Mr. Brian Weasler's with us. Hello, Brian.
Hello, all.
Oh, I like that mug. More product placement. Shameful, shameful, shameful. We're going down to the bottom of the panel now from Arizona, home of Rob Inman. We're also joined by Rob's neighbor, Ron Delvaux.
Hello, I'm in Parks, Arizona. I only have 2 clicks on my phone. I can hear you good, but I can go picture-wise. I don't know if you can even hear me.
We can hear you, Ron, loud and clear. Thanks for being here out in Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, I'm also in it. I've been around for a long, long time in the CoCo community and stuff, but just pretty much on my own, and then local. And then I was on Computer, but that's about it. I'll try and contribute.
Okay. I'm being told that my audio is really loud. Okay, so I'm going to lower my audio. Testes, 1, 2. Testes, 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 1, 2. All right. Let me know if that audio feeds any better there, Jason Downs. Welcome, Ron Delvaux. We have royalty in the house, the Lord of the Floppies, the Duke of Digital Media and Analog Storage, none other than Sir David Ladd. Welcome back to the program, David. Welcome back to the program, David. Welcome back to the program, David. All right, so 3 strikes and you're out. Somebody, David Ladd has stepped away. Yes, yes. I think you had to put another circuit board in the frying pan. He'll be back here momentarily.
I did find something else better than
I'm
you.
back.
David Ladd, welcome to the program.
Froze on me. Froze on me.
All right,
I'm here. Thank you for having me. Is everybody ready? Are we ready to rock and roll this session?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yes,
Let's do it. Let's all get pumped up. Let's rock and roll.
All right.
I've missed David Ladd's over enthusiasm almost as much as the Black Plague.
Dial it back a little.
Yes, much like a festering cold sore, David Ladd is here. So, speaking of festering, from down under, one of our many Australian panel members. G'day, Nicholas Morentis.
G'day, everyone. How are you?
We're doing good. We're doing good. Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, our special guest of the hour. Our special guest today, some of you met him at VCF West. I'm going to try not to butcher your name, but it is Erturk Kokalar. Yes?
Hi,
Close?
That was perfect. Nice to be here. Nice to meet all of you.
Welcome.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting.
Well, we're glad to have you. And thank you for being here. And it was Tony Capolini who has tried to put together this meeting. I guess, was Tony there with you at Tony was at VCF West as well, right?
Yeah, he was. He
Right.
wasn't helping able, but he's local. And
Right. So Tony was there. So Tony had suggested that could we try to interview you or talk to you during the broadcast. We were streaming live from there, and understand you've got a project you're going to share with us, Erturk. Why don't you start off first since we'll work backwards. You were just at VCF West recently. Was that your first time going to one of these vintage computing shows, or have you been to many in the past?
Yeah, actually, before I do want to thank Tony for introducing me and you for putting me on the show. And yes, VCF was this year was the first time I actually been to. And I live in, Silicon Valley. I've always seen it, always wanted to go. There was always something coming up. And this year, the Retro Shield project that I did was a good excuse to be there and actually present it. And throughout the whole 2 days, I met a lot of people, which is nice for this type of work and community.
Excellent, excellent. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory? Are you old enough to have been alive in the 80s? You look kind of young. So.
Well, I'm old actually. I was gonna mention a couple of things that
Okay.
maybe you guys will figure it out. Yes, I did grow up in the 1980s, early and late. And I'm from Turkey. Probably my name gives it. It's from a town in the south, middle part, like south part of the Turkey, where Cyprus kind of points a finger at Turkey. Right there is a town called Adana, and there's actually a U.S. Interlink base in there. During the Gulf War, you may have seen that place, or it must have been talked a lot at that time. So we had some slides. I'll just start, and then Tony, when I say we can just start looking at them. The computers I grew up on were Auric Atmos 48K. I don't know if has anybody heard about it?
No.
Auric? No? So it's a French computer, and at that time our choices were either ZX Sinclair Spectrum or Auric. And for some reason my dad chose Auric. I don't know why, but I'm glad he did that, because the only thing I got was a book and the computer. It came with a demo game. That's it. On the other hand, Spectrum had a lot of games out there, so I was thinking if I had gotten the Spectrum, I would have probably just spent my time on gaming and not enough programming.
Okay.
Yeah. And then let me know if I'm going into too much detail or not. People feel free to ask me questions. We'll see. Okay.
Okay. So your first computer was this Auric Atmos, which I have not heard of, but Al Hartman just said he did. And
Yeah.
I think that's a similar story for a lot of us with the color computer. We started off with the computer and the book. And even though there were games, I think a lot of us, myself, we dug into the basic. Was it basic when you turned on that computer?
Yes.
What kind of processor was it? Like a Z80 processor, or?
It was a 6502.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And basic, simple graphics, same as others, save to cassette. It came with a disk drive, but we didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of typing basic stuff and doing what the program did, and then modify it and, do that kind of stuff.
I like the black and orange keyboard. Did yours have
Exactly, yeah. I have one actually I could show.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I've not heard of that machine. Auric. Anybody else hear of Auric?
Yeah, no, I've heard of it.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I have an Auric.
Oh, you have one?
Yeah. Not the orange one. I think the first ones were white, weren't they?
You probably have the one, yeah. Auric Atmos one. Yeah.
The very first one, yeah.
Yeah. It actually looks very cool for, the color-wise.
Oh, wow, look at that. It looks somewhat like a Spectrum.
Get a designer to make a keyboard just like that.
Looks like a really nice keyboard.
Yeah.
Almost like the TI 99.
Yeah, that's a good quality.
Cool.
Good quality keyboard. Look at that. We got some color. Now look at their arrow keys. That is way different. So you got up and down on the opposite sides of the space bar, and then left and right. That is a perversion of arrow key synchronicity here. Look at that, dude. You got up, down, left. It's just weird. It's different, right? So you definitely had to be two-handed.
Having them separate on two hands definitely helped with.
You should have heard Rob Inman's rant on the whole arrow key thing the other night on Discord. It was interesting. So
is that an expansion slot on the back of it?
So on the front, that's where the power came in. This was the expansion port, like for hard drives and stuff like that. I forgot what this is. Let's see. There should be a text someplace. Oh, it's a printer. So it had an expansion port in here. Printer. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe
a little bit. Yeah, like like a pin. It does look like pin connectors. Yeah, like a ribbon cable would go in there or something.
Right. Exactly. And this was the tape.
Okay.
You had to build like an adapter cable.
Looks like ours. It's the same as our interface.
It looks similar. It's kind of a DIN style connector. Although that's more of a
7 pins.
7
a couple
pins.
Extra pins. Yeah.
I built the cable too. Yeah, actually, I could maybe try it later
Yeah,
on.
and is that like RF out on that RCA jack there?
Yeah, that's RF. That's RGB. RF was this is in Europe, PAL system.
Okay.
I don't know if they ever made an NTSC compliant version, but
So that's your original, or did you reacquire that later on?
one of them is my original, and the other one's actually I bought a second one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a lot of memories. I think
Yeah.
a lot of these projects are good memories,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I did. And there was actually a problem with this computer. If you can tell, I put a tape on this side.
Yes. Yeah.
It's because the power plug was plugged in there, and if you're not careful, you could actually touch the expansion port pins in there, and you can short stuff. Yeah, so that was a common problem. I actually messed up the first one, and it was fixed.
Interesting machine. Yeah, I had never seen that before.
So now I want to see it powered on.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Hey,
another
very
next.
Yeah, there we go.
And what flavor of BASIC did it have? Was it a Microsoft BASIC or some other just generic BASIC?
That's a good question. I don't remember top of my head.
Are there emulators for that system? I would imagine.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Interesting.
name too, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, it might be worth looking into.
Yeah.
So that's like for you, that was your first computer. Like for a lot of us, the color computer was our first computer. So that's your first love right there, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And then the other nice thing about being close to a U.S. base was there was a couple of stores in my hometown where they would go buy stuff from the base, and I played with Simon, the color game, and then I had a TI professor calculator that taught you how to do the arithmetic. Even my dad was electrical engineer as well. He had an IC master catalogs. I don't know if you guys know. They had these thick books of data sheets in there. I remember all the microprocessors, the national, a lot of stuff in there. I would just scroll through and learn through those. That's how I became an electrical engineer afterwards. Thanks to my dad.
So you're a hardware guy by trade then? That's
Exactly. Yeah, I'm an electrical hardware guy. My BS is in electrical engineering. All my jobs are electrical engineering. I do firmware / software because it's good to make hardware do stuff, and that's where I stop. I don't go above the firmware, like the apps and things like that, but the combination of these two is actually a lot of fun for me.
So when you started, like you mentioned, you got the ORC and you were programming BASIC on it because you didn't have any third-party software and stuff like that. Did you get into the hardware on the ORC fairly early on too, or did you do the software stuff first for a while and then get to the hardware?
No, I didn't actually touch the ORC a lot because if it was broken, I would be in trouble. But I did a lot of hardware projects on my own. Initially started with simple LED circuits, then 555s, and then just grew up there. And when I got to high school, that's where I started building microcomputers. The 6502 Z80. These were chips. Sometimes the Motorola chips, 6803. And I remember 68HC11 was too expensive at the time, but I was able to get one. So
was that a course they taught you in high school, as how to build your own computer?
They had a microcomputer class, just one class. And then the professor actually loved Motorola CPU, so he made us use 6803, and it's just one class. But they did teach it, yeah.
Wow, I don't know too many high schools around in North America here that teach you how to make a computer. They might teach you.
Oh, sorry, not high school. This was a university. Correct. At high school, no, it was all on my own.
Oh, okay.
I misunderstood. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the project you have now, is this your first foray into creating a new hybrid, old and new hardware project? Have you been doing hardware things for a while?
Yeah, so I had a lot of build. Let me see, Steve, do you have the slide deck, or do you want?
I do. I can switch over to it if you'd like. Yes. Let me.
Yeah, let's go to slide number 4. So I had a
Okay.
couple of pictures of the projects I've done, mostly microprocessor-based ones.
So their number right here. Is this it right here?
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so these are some of your projects. We have an EEPROM programmer, a 6502, a 68HC11, and then a 6809.
And these are the ones that kind of survived, especially that EEPROM programmer was from my high school. And I did that to build, I remember it was a Z80 microcomputer, and I didn't have a way to program the EEPROM. And, I just did one by one, I guess everybody has done this type of stuff, right? You just build it and make it work.
Well, not everybody, but some people have. I haven't done any. I've never touched a soldering iron in my life, so
I'm not a hardware guy either.
Yeah.
Some people have and will never do it again.
Yes, no,
I
that's
still
cool.
I love it.
Mine, but
yeah. So I remember programming. It was like a 1K or 2K monitor ROM, and you made a mistake, and there was no way to erase the byte easily. And I remember on Z80, the knob operation is 00, so you could go to 00, and then kind of like readjust your monitor code, and it was a lot of painful but fun times in the time. So I've been started building almost a processor-based hardware for a long time, and then it got to the point where initially I was wiring everything by hand, and then I started building PCBs, sometimes breadboarding, things like that. But I came to the realization that I spend a lot of time cooking up the ROM, the RAM, the I/O, all the power supply stuff, and I have to figure out how to do the programming. And then if I need to build something and make it work, then I come up with another idea. Hey, should I try this? But then it's another way of, okay, I got to build more hardware, hook up more wires, and test it. And it got to the point where I need to be lazy. And one of my first managers told me the best engineer is the lazy one, because you'll automate the stuff so you can just watch things happen instead of doing it yourself.
They call that working smarter, not harder, right? But yeah, I like to be honest too and say, yeah, I am lazy by default. So my brain always looks for the quickest path, and my body likes to do the least amount of labor whenever possible. So cool.
And then so after I came to US, so I built 6502, and then I started looking at what else should I build, and looking at Motorola, I built 6803, but then I noticed 6809. The moment I looked into details, I was like, wow, how come nobody knew about this processor? It's very high end. There's everything in there that you want in an 8-bit microprocessor. So I started building stuff with 6809. The first project I did was Simon. Is John Linwell online? He's not, right? But you guys know him?
Yeah, we know him. Yeah, I don't know if he's not in the panel. He may or may not be watching, but yeah, we
Okay, yeah. So I built the Simon 6809. It's the next slide number 5.
Okay.
I'll just give an example of a couple of these 6809s and then jump to Retro Shield quickly. But the
no, take your
idea
time.
here was, the idea for me was I need to make this as easy as possible for me to, play with this microprocessor. So at that time, FTDI chip was, very popular. And then I decided to build a computer, or a mini computer that gets connected to the computer, and that's it. I could do everything from that. And hence the Simon was born. It's 32K RAM, 8K ROM. I used a monitor code from Leonard. It has an internal assembler and disassembler, and everything is powered from the USB. So you plug it in, open up the terminal, and you can do coding and stuff like that. And I played with this a lot, to learn about 6809. Then I decided, then I found out about the CoCo processor. So I got some, and then I found out about these, high-level OSs like a Flex and OS 9 and etc. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to build a computer that I can run this on? And that's when the Simon Turbo came up. It's the next slide, number 6, which is, okay, everything now needs to be high-tech, I need to have an SD card. USB would be good. And and I needed this to be modular so I can build stuff on top of each other. So I built this, it's very hacky, but it worked. I was able to port Flex 1609 or Flex 09 and run it from RAM disk. The module on the top with the USB ports and SD card was this was before Arduino came out, I believe. So these guys made it easy to connect the USB devices and SD card. I never got it to working because it was not that simple. But maybe I might have gotten the SD card working. I don't remember. But then I realized, like, hey, this has gotten out of touch. Like, it's too complicated. I need to build, something more simple. That's when the RetroShield idea came up. What if I said, what if I keep the processor? Because there's a lot of emulators, but it's good to try it, but it's not the same feeling. So I said, I want to keep the processor, but what if I might emulate everything with another microprocessor? So I built a couple of things. It was like 2006 and 2008. And my initial board was to support 6502, 6809, and Z80 at the same time.
Wow.
And I got it to work. Let me see if I can show you a picture, but it looked ugly.
It's not on the next slide on this thing I have right now, does it, or no?
No, let me see. So maybe I'll share this. Is this good, interesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're learning about the evolution of this. Now, this is cool. I mean,
Yeah.
this looks like a nice little double-decker. Oh, wow.
Exactly, yeah.
Look at all
that
these.
was the first RetroShield.
Well, so these are like your pin connectors for your different CPUs?
Exactly, yeah. You could only plug one.
But you
I
had
staggered
multiple.
The pin sockets then, so you could just switch out which one.
Say it again.
You staggered the socket pins there, so you could just plug in, like you said, one at a time.
Exactly, yeah. All the data buses and the are shared. If you control signals, I have to yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's really cool. That's right.
Yeah.
What I like about this, even though I'm not a hardware guy, electronics guy, because I can see the traces, you can kind of see where these pin connectors are going. So it's a little bit visual,
Yeah, exactly. That's good. And this was good. Then I came up, hey, there are other more processors. So like if I add one more, this thing's gonna grow and
Actually, hold on, hold that frame right now. I just realized something that, okay, I need to make that bigger. Okay. The way I was saying before, people couldn't see it as clearly. All right. Yeah. So
I have a question before we go on to the next part, but
Yeah.
you have this little thing etched on the board. It says big brain controls small brain. What's the story behind that?
There was a joke. It's a Turkish guy. Do we have time for a joke?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. As long as it's not funny, because we have not had anything funny on this show so far. So.
Okay. So this guy goes to a zoo and goes to the aquarium section. By the way, this guy is Turkish. And he comes across this fish, a school of fish, and on the top it says this, be careful, this you can control these fish by looking at them. And because human brain is bigger than the fish brain, you can if you move to the left or to the right, they will follow you. And the Turkish guy sees one of. Any questions?
No, we're
yeah. So the Turkish
waiting
guy,
to see where this goes.
In the beginning, he's very suspicious. So he stands outside. Somebody else comes in. He stares. That person stares at the fish for 10 seconds. Fish all pile up. Come together, facing the person, and then that person moves to the right. The fish follow him, and then the person moves to the left. The fish follow him to the left. And our Turkish guy is very impressed. He said, I'm going to try the same thing too. After that person leaves, he goes in front of the window, starts staring at the fish. The fish come together. They stare at this person, the Turkish guy. And, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, nobody moves. The Turkish guy is still staring. And then suddenly the fish moves to the left and the Turkish guy moves to the left. So that's where the story came. I somehow that joke stuck with me. In this case, I don't know who's the big brain, but we have Arduino and we have the 6502 or 6809, and I just put that comment there.
Okay.
Big brain. In this case, is probably the 6809 is controlling Arduino, even though Arduino is more powerful than the 6809.
So when the 6809 moves right, the Arduino moves right too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right.
Okay. So there it is.
All right. So you want me to switch back to the slide? Okay. There we go.
So the next step was, okay, how do I make this prototype, in a cleaner way, and I can, make it open for different types of processors. And let's see. Go ahead.
Do I switch slides? Projects and goals of RetroShield?
Look at the goal, yeah.
Okay.
So I talked about the first idea, keep a microprocessor, physical one, make it easy. I'll talk about why I chose Arduino later on. But the other thing I wanted to do with this was, definitely make it open source, hardware-wise and software-wise. Because I've seen, there's actually a lot of cool stuff out there, and I'm glad it lives over there, right? If you guys know, in Silicon Valley, there was a surplus store called Halted. And you go in there, there's a lot of old stuff, and the smell is there, right? But because of the rents are so high, that place shut down. It's like a part of Silicon Valley history. And like the first thing that came to my mind, we should have turned that place into a museum, like where a lot of stuff happened. Like we would go there every Saturday, pick up parts and things like that. So I wanted to contribute, give back. That was one thing. The second one is make PCBs available. This is an experiment I'm doing because stuff is simple for people to breadboard it in there like a one night. But also, if somebody wants to get a PCB, I want to make that option, because I always felt somebody makes a great computer, posts it online, but I can't build it because they use a PCB, complicated PCB, or it's a lot of wiring that I didn't want to deal with. So that kind of like made the end result was the RetroShield. So we can go to next slide, number 8. Are you guys familiar with Arduino?
Some of us are, for sure.
Yeah, it's a very nice development platform. You can do a lot of hardware projects. A lot of software stuff. There's a great support out there. It's very extendable with using Arduino shields. The picture has a LCD plus a button shield. You can get like SD cards, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, audio. What else? There's so many different kinds of stuff out there. You can control robots, things like that. It's done in C. There's a bootloader. It's similar to Simon 69, where you write on the obviously this is much better. But there's an IDE, you write your code, push a button, it gets downloaded, and you can get the serial output back and write your command. So what I did was I designed a single card for each microprocessor. This one is showing 6502.
We won't hold that against you.
Yeah. Yes, I know. I thought a lot about it. I was going to paint black on it and write 1609. But then I had to fix the silk screen as well. I'm like, I'm not going to bother.
That's fine. We get the idea. Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah.
Just realized he has a board for the 6809E also. So.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things about Arduino. It's a 16 megahertz, 1.6 megahertz processor. Has a lot of flash, but very limited RAM, only 8K. Best thing is it's 5-volt tolerant, which all of these, or most of these 8-bit processors are. What happens is, basically, let's see, where's the next slide?
You want me to switch to number 9?
Give me like 10 seconds. So basically, most of the CPU signals are connected to the Arduino, and Arduino drives the clock and does what the CPU wants to do. So that's the idea. And I'm going to go into detail in a few slides later, but let's look at the number 9. This shows a summary of all the processors I have supported so far.
Okay, so 6502, you can do an Apple I
Yes.
What does mon mean? Monitor?
Monitor, correct.
Monitor
yeah,
basic. Okay.
And the Apple cassette interface ROM.
Okay.
So monitor is the WASMon. Basically, you can do three things, edit, read memory, and run.
Okay.
Basic is, it has an 8K ROM to run integer basic. And the Apple cassette ROM interface was basically to read and write from the cassette. And the Apple One hardware uses like a different frequency for 1 and another different frequency for 0. And I can run that ROM, and what I did was emulate actually generating the sound part of it. And somebody else, if they have time, maybe they can write the Arduino code to emulate reading from the cassette part of it.
Now, is that the actual ROMs from the Apple One that you're using there? Like that
Exactly,
monitors?
yeah. No, exactly.
You like call -151 and it would pop up the monitor if you're in basic type thing, like the Apple One did?
Yeah, everything's, yeah. So the CPU is executing I want to say almost, so as much as possible, I use the same ROMs, the exact ROMs. And the way I kind of like to make a trade-off is sometimes I need to emulate the hardware. And maybe let's go to slide, let's look at, can you go to slide 11? Yeah, so this is showing the signals wise, which I talked about, I drive the E and Q signals, the reset, and then I look at the, read-write address data. And if needed, I can also drive the interrupt lines. So what happens is the processor drives the clock signals and looks at what the processor is trying to do, whether it's a read or write, from which address. And if it's a read, it'll look at the address range. If it's coming from the ROM, I have the whole ROM embedded in the Arduino code. It'll take the corresponding byte and feed it to the processor. And then if the processor is trying to write to a memory location, it'll capture the byte and then save it in the RAM. And then just keeps doing this over and over again. When it comes to the peripherals, for example, the Apple One has 6821 that it uses for the screen out and the keyboard in. What I do is when the processor is reading from those special registers, Arduino detects it, and for example, if the CPU is writing to the outgoing register, Arduino will feed that byte also to the Arduino serial port. So you see it on the terminal on your PC. And if you press a button on the PC side, the Arduino will set the 6821 registers accordingly. So when the CPU, through the ROM code, checks if there's a character pressed or not, then it can, receive the character. So
is it all terminal based then? Like there's no video driver that you've got on the Arduino to drive its own video on HDMI or?
For Apple One, correct. I will get the video later on. And to answer your question, so I keep the ROM intact as much as possible, but sometimes it's very difficult to emulate the hardware. For example, we brought up Commodore 64 on the 6502 platform, and emulating the VIC was very difficult. So what we did was, we modified the ROM areas a little bit. So instead of the byte going to screen, it actually goes to a special address, and Arduino detects that address and then, handles it accordingly. So I make these kind of small modifications as needed. Otherwise, it's, like for Apple One, as far as I remember, all the ROMs are intact. I don't touch them. But if you go back to slide number 9, Kim 1, I do remember modifying a couple of bytes to, because Kim 1 expects a break character in the beginning or like some initial states, and I bypass them by changing those commands to no operations. So I do this type of minor stuff, but otherwise it's the original ROM as much as possible. Yeah. So, I do 6809E. I ran Simon on a Z80. I also emulate 8251, the UART IC. And again, this is like, I don't emulate the full IC, but just enough that when the CPU writes to data out register, I grab that byte and send it to the Arduino UART. And I did, 8031, 8085, 1802. I'll talk about these a little bit in the later detail. But, basically, I look at the data sheets. If you go to slide number 28, to give you an idea, this is 6809, so should be good.
Okay.
So this shows all the waveforms happening at the hardware level, and Arduino basically, you're looking at like a yellow 1 and yellow 2 is when the clock is low, and then yellow 2 to yellow 3 is clock is high. So in the first low part, all the address lines, data lines are driven by the CPU, and then the high period is when the actual transactions are almost ready to be executed. When the clock goes down on that falling edge on yellow 3 is when transactions complete. So Arduino prepares everything and then drives the clock low and high and gets things done. Any questions so far?
Which Arduino boards are you targeting with this?
So I use a Arduino Mega.
Okay.
Because it has the big header with a lot of GPIOs on it.
Gotcha.
And then let me talk a little bit about why Arduino Mega on slide number 13. The big thing I chose Arduino Mega is the port assignments. There's like a port A, B, C, D, and each has like 8 bits. And on Arduino Mega, those full 8 bits are available on the headers, and actually there are 3 ports, so that's actually good for me because 16-bit address and 8-bit data bus, that means I can read and write these buses in one instruction. I looked at faster and newer platforms, Arduino Due, there's a couple of other ones, but what I see is the ports are randomly assigned, so I have to take like 2 bits from this port, 4 bits from another port, 5 bits from third port, and then I have to do a lot of bit shifting and then ORing and ending, and this kills the speed because I spend a lot of cycles just doing that, and anything I'm not doing stuff for CPU is like waste of time. The other problem is the newer ARM-based platforms are 3-volt devices, so I need level shifters. Even though they run really super fast. I'm looking at actually 2 right now. One is Teensy platform. I found out 3.5 is a 5-volt tolerant platform, and it runs at 120 megahertz, has a lot of RAM, and this weekend I breadboard and got it working, so that's promising. Then people talk about ESP32 as well, which is another much faster processor, but I think that's going to need level shifters. But the good thing is it has Wi-Fi and things like that. Having said all that, I still come back to Mega because there's a lot of shields out there, and you asked about the video. So if you go back to slide number 21, there's a video plus keyboard shield for Arduino Mega, and you plug it in, and when we were bringing up Commodore 64, we plugged this in, libraries are all there, and we mapped a couple of addresses and modified the ROM a little bit, and we got this running in like 10 minutes. So everything's available there, and this comes back to my being expendable is when I built the Simon Turbo, this is like my ultimate dream. Hey, do I want video? Yes, here it is. Plug it in, make it work. Do I want SD card? Yes, plug it in. Plug the shield. And some of these are stackable on top of each other, so you could build a tower until you run out of GPIOs.
Wow.
But that's what I like about Arduino. That stuff.
I have a real quick dumb question. Number one, Keith Cunningham just joined us and says, "What's the name of the product?" You want to remind everybody what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, I call this a retro shield for Arduino Mega, and the goal is to keep the 8-bit processors alive by hooking them up to Arduino, and all the system hardware is emulated by Arduino, but the real processor executes code. That's my like a few sentence.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Elevator.
So it's almost sounds like we're starting to build a computer system now, where it's not no longer just a hobby board or a single board computer or a project board. It's almost sound like now that you have these shields and these inputs and outputs, we can start to build a computer.
Exactly.
Would your goal be to literally clone the hardware where we've got cycle accurate, hardware accurate, or would it be just good enough where it can run most of the software? I mean, what would a perfect end game be for something like this?
So it's a little of both, and the reason I say that is, my goal is never to emulate the exact hardware as is. I have that side of me where like I like to hack, build, expand, and my goal is, use all the valuable existing software and support, and knowledge, and be able to try new things, when you want to. And so Arduino or like Teensy will emulate as fast as possible, as good as possible. And I want to make it an open platform for others to try it, but I don't want to, for example, make it a Commodore 64. There's already a Commodore 64 for it, or like other stuff for it. For me, it's more like to experience things that I haven't experienced. In this case, like OS 9 or NightOS 09. I haven't I can experience them, but I like to experiment on this and expand it. There's a lot of other processors that I haven't played with. Make this a platform for those. And I've seen other people build stuff, and that gives me pleasure. Like, hey, this is something they can play with, and I get to see what they've done with it.
Yeah, that's neat. So, because when in our little world here with the color computer and the 6809, we've got 2 or 3 hardware replacements, emulated hardware replacements. So we've got a CoCo 3 FPGA solution that's fairly close to hardware accurate, but it has some enhancements, more speed and more modes and stuff. There's 2 other ones. There's the Matchbox CoCo. There's one that runs on the Mister platform. So we've got 2 or 3 hardware emulated platforms that are fairly good clones to run old software with also new capabilities. This is not exactly in that same arena, though. This is similar, but not quite the same.
Right.
So this is still kind of a project hobby type thing for somebody who wants to get their hands, roll up their sleeves and work on some electronics and some hardware tinkering. And it should be maybe a low barrier to entry where you don't have to be super sophisticated with soldering and circuit design. So, and this is funny because we just talked about this about 2 weeks ago. So they just, now you're familiar with Radio Shack, right? The original Radio Shack store.
Yeah.
So they just opened up a brand new Radio Shack store. Again, they went out of business, came back, went out of business, came back, 2 or 3 times. But now they're back again. There's a brand new Radio Shack corporate store, and they're doing stuff with Arduino projects. So in the old days, we had like the 101 electronics kits where you could use the little springs and clips and make your circuits and make lights and switches. So this is kind of like the new version of that, right? Where you can do these kind of tinkery type projects with electronics and computing. But you don't have to be a mad scientist to do it. Is that a good kind of synopsis?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
So, and actually, an interesting thing on that too is that the people at Radio Shack, I think that was in Fort Worth too, or near the Fort Worth area, are mentioning that they're planning on doing like little public gatherings where people can come and learn about Arduinos and everything else that they're selling. And maybe your project would be a nice one to actually take and do a show and tell to, show how your thing works, and then they sell the actual Arduinos and stuff there, so people could actually get involved, take a look, and go, I like this, I want to try this, and then actually buy the parts right then and there after getting shown, take them home and go at it.
Right. Is David still on the call? Because I think David's working on something with an Arduino where he's got his PS2 mouse adapter. Isn't that Arduino based, David?
Cool.
We'll find out. Hey, David.
Yeah, actually, it is.
Yeah. Okay. So this is cool.
His current version uses the Nano, Arduino Nano board.
Now, what I think one of your challenges, I think one of the things you said here, Airturk, was that you're choosing some parts that are inexpensive and easy to get. What do you think the life expectancy of some of these parts are? Because, if anything else, things don't remain around forever. So the sourceability of these components, what do you think, how many months, years do you think we have where this project would still be, you can get these things pretty easily?
I think Arduino wise, I'm not concerned, but CPU wise, there's that those are getting very difficult to
Yeah,
find,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like 6502, 6809, Z80 are still available, but the other ones, I feel like maybe in like 20, 30 years, like people won't know about these things, and I don't think it's yeah,
Yeah, so there's definitely a preservation component here,
exactly,
trying
yeah,
to keep the CPU alive.
yeah.
It's like
And
I would agree with you on the Arduino. They're pretty much bulletproof. I've actually got a couple that I use on some drones, and trust me, I've drilled them in the ground a couple times, and they just are bulletproof.
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. My worry is always like we have these CPUs and these are delicate, and especially the rare ones, like if something happens to them or they're sitting unused, and this gives them
it's
way
like
to play with.
it's a new body for an old brain, right? So you can just resurrect that brain.
Yeah.
And this depends. Now it depends on is the brain moving the fish or is the fish moving the brain here? But
And that's the biggest difference between your project and the other ones that Steve was mentioning, or like the CoCo FPGA and the Mr. CoCo and stuff, because those are emulating the CPU itself as well.
oh yeah, they're not
Whereas
using
you
the
actually have the actual original CPU running.
Yeah.
yeah. So this is a perfect example. Let's say somebody's got a CoCo 3 and they've done a 6309 upgrade. Are you familiar with the 6309, which is the Hitachi version? All right. So let's say somebody's got a CoCo 3 and they pop the 6309 in there. So hey, what am I going to do with this now unused 6809? Well, I can get this little project here, pop that chip in, and give it a place to live and tinker with. Yeah, that's kind of cool. This reminds me a little bit too of when we had the 8-bit guy on a couple of weeks ago. His kind of Commodore system he's working on, where he's not trying to clone a Commodore, but he's trying to build a new what might have been a Commodore in succession to some of the other things, using close to original parts and the whole 9 yards. But it's not going to be a clone. It's not going to be compatible, but you can still develop for it, right? So with some of these shields, if we can get VGA output, we could make a 6809 programmable computer that we could write software for.
Right.
And you got your shield for your SD card and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's a trade-off, like part of me says, hey, I should like do stuff on my own and like build an OS, build a computer. But then on the other hand, there's a great OSs out there, like you could use them if you support the same hardware. And I always go back and forth. Like I play a little bit and then I say, okay, maybe I should do, but then I don't have enough time. So I go back to like, this old stuff. Like you said, it's stuff there. I don't know. I think I may have worked with the 8-bit guy as well when we were bringing up the Commodore 64.
Okay.
Not him directly, but somebody who's working on the project.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. All of that stuff is happening, and
yeah, these are modern projects. I think it's instead of working on the old 101 electronics kit, this is the new way to work on projects. It seems like.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cool. So are you selling these now from your website, or how do people get these if they want to work on this kind of stuff?
So if they want to work on stuff, so the first easy thing is, if they have the CPU and the breadboard, they can just wire it. I'll show you an example. Here's one. You can just do type of stuff. So you can do this at home, download the code, hook up your CPU, get the Arduino, and then this is not an Arduino, by the way, but you can make it work that way. If you like to buy PCBs, I sell PCBs as well. I'm trying selling kits for like 6809, Z80, and 6502, and we'll see how that goes. It's an experiment. I feel like most kids nowadays, like they're not into this type of stuff. They just downloadable apps. And then it's only like my generation and like similar generations like who know these things that they grow up on this stuff.
So do you have a parts list on your website at least, where you say if you want to build the 6502, here's the parts you need, or?
Yeah. So I have a GitLab repository. Let me see on page. page 26, gitlab.com/8bitsforce.
Okay.
So I have a folder for the hardware, and I have a folder for the individual Arduino codes. Maybe click on one. Let's see.
I'm trying to see if I click on it. Okay, so here we go. It's going to pop up.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to copy and paste this into the chat too. So for those who want to see it, you guys can get to it. All right, so it's GitLab. Okay, go ahead. All right.
So it's a similar idea. I put down what I supported. My goal is to build a daughter card for every 8-bit microprocessor out there.
Okay.
I even got the Intel 4004 chips.
Wow.
8008, 8080, 4040, 8008, etc. And a lot of people like it, especially at VCF, they recommended other CPUs to bring up. So as I have time, I'm just going through slowly. It's a lot of research, learning.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was the reception at VCF? That a lot of people like this project of yours?
I would say there's a small niche market for this type of stuff.
Okay.
Most people are expecting like, hey, I want to see like a computer, like a platform with a keyboard, I can play games and things like that.
Yeah.
But there was small people like when they come in, their reaction is like, whoa, okay, this is actually cool. Like those are people, I guess, who wants to build hardware stuff or like play with it.
Yeah.
I can't say it's like a lot of interest.
Okay, so here's a close up of your 6.5 CO2.
Yeah.
Retro
if you
show.
scroll down, we have the 60. That's my original 6809 from like years ago.
So you actually wrote down on the
what
all the pins were here. So
pins, yeah. A lot of wiring, like I've done so many wiring with that.
So if you're not sure what it is, it's a 6809E. It says it right there in blue ballpoint, right? So that's awesome. Is your Z80? Yeah. Okay. And out of the box, you're doing open source, which I've come to understand the benefit of doing that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we're thinking the guy you've talked to is probably Jim Brain from Retro Innovations when it comes to talking about the Commodore 64 project that the 8-bit guy's working on.
I talked to Michael Style is the software guy. I think.
Oh, okay.
I believe he's doing the. I don't know if this is public or not. I maybe not sure.
Okay, well then if you're not sure, then maybe don't say it. Okay.
And I'm on.
Oh, Jim's here. Jim, have you talked to AirTurk before?
I not. Nice to make your acquaintance.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay.
Cool.
Jim runs Retro Innovations. I'm sure you've heard of them. They're probably the largest, largest innovator in.
Are we lying through our teeth right now? 'Cause I got lots of fibs I can tell.
Like this is the greatest show you've ever been on, right? So
that's right. No other show comes close.
That's right.
Nice.
Cool. I do agree with the earlier comments about the Arduino Mega. I'd just add a little bit more, maybe a little bit more color. I've got a project that allows folks to connect an Arduino Mega to the CoCo expansion port. And if you look on the picture that you have on the screen right now, I think one of the things that it's pointed out is all those ports are right there, but more interestingly, that connector right there that's kind of in the second 2/3 of the way over from the left, where the board connects to the Arduino Mega, that is an additional connector from the original Arduino connector set. The original Arduino connector set are these connectors that are kind of at the top and the bottom. And so a lot of the shields that was being discussed earlier, they hide those pins on the top and the bottom on the left-hand side there, right underneath the LCD screen. But those ones on the far right, the ones that you're looking at right now, they do not, a lot of the shields don't use those pins, and so it makes it really easy to be able to connect this thing right off to the end of the Arduino Mega without affecting any of the other connections that you might want to use for your shields. Because the worst thing would be is to have this on there and then have a shield, and the shield says, well, I need to have these pins, and you're like, well, I already used them for this retro shield. So, so that's one of the beauties of the Arduino Mega platform, is that it's kind of like a bonus port, right? And so nobody else uses it, and so it's free for you to use, and you know you don't have to worry about sharing it with anybody else.
Yeah.
So,
and then,
one of the things I think is important is, and I didn't think I'd heard as yet, but so obviously you're emulating the peripherals and all that in the Arduino. Which one of the CPUs have you gotten to run the fastest, and how fast is that?
So the fastest CPUs are 6809 and 6502 for now. I only tried 6 CPUs. And why is this? Because these CPUs execute code in 1 clock cycle. You know, most instructions get done in one clock cycles, and or 2, you know, as needed. But other ones, for example, Z80, 8085, or 1802 takes 8 CPU cycles to execute like 1 CPU cycle. And with Arduino, I could get up to 200 kilohertz-ish, you know, sometimes 220, sometimes 170-ish for 6502 and 6809. And they're not running at full speed because of the Arduino is only a 16 megahertz processor. But for example, 6802, even though this Arduino can clock at 200 kilohertz, because the CPU is executing at 8 cycles per CPU cycle, the effectiveness of the CPU drops a little bit. And you can feel it. And by knowing the hardware details, you kind of like see this. Like Z80, for example, runs at 4 megahertz, but actually it's as fast as a 1 megahertz, you know, 6809 or 6502. So you can see these things. And I've looked at TeenZ 3.5. That could go up to 1 megahertz. I'm just bringing up stuff. I got the 6502 running, but I need to do more validation to say, yes, it can be run faster. Jim, you said something about, which is actually interesting. And Steve, this may go back to your question about like, what's the goal of these things? And I said it's about computers, but it may not be just a computer, right? It may be anything that has these processors in them. For example, when we were bringing up Commodore 64, the disk drive 1541 has a 6502 in it. And we were joking, but it's possible you could have 2 Arduino, 2 retro shields, one of them emulating Commodore 64, and the other one's emulating
the drive.
The disk drive, right? And then I was thinking about this this week. If you guys are into ham radio, there's this device called it's like a Morse machine, you know, like Morse code keyer for your transmitter. It has a 8031 inside, and I was thinking, they don't make this machine anymore. What if I go get the code for this and get an Arduino audio shield and see if I can actually emulate this thing? And then looked it up. The company is still around, so I have to get permission from them for their ROM copyrights. But you know, that may be okay, like for me to do on a personal level, just to see if it's doable.
That's cool. Something you wouldn't have thunk about, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is like go ahead.
You're going into the matrix, Jim. We're losing Jim on some bandwidth issues here.
No, I'm here.
You're back.
I didn't realize he had more on it. I was gonna point out that other use case that you can think about. People can argue about the I guess the benefit of it or whatnot, but a lot of computer systems of the day, including the Tandy color computer, came out with a small 4-color plotter, right? It used like little 3.5 inch wide or 4 inch wide paper or whatever, and a lot of those devices were they used early type of microcontroller inside the plotter. Those microcontrollers they're derivatives of either 6800, a 6803, a 6502 or whatever, but they're special brand parts. I mean, they're like house branded and they got built-in ROMs and whatnot. And if you have those and that's your thing, and you want to
We're losing you again, Jim.
continue to, or you want them, and you want them to work better, you could use this particular product to replace the microcontrollers.
Yeah, you're breaking up really bad now, Jim. Yeah, I think we got the gist of what you're saying, though. You're saying that this could replace the microcontrollers and some of these plotters and other specialty devices, right, to make them run better?
Correct.
Yeah.
Let me switch over to the main PC.
Yeah.
So you're thinking Arduino is the interface between the real CPU and then that target platform?
Well, it could replace the actual CPU in there.
Oh, to replace the CPU.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Speaking of replacing the CPUs, did you guys see the Monster 6502 project?
No. What is it called?
It's called Monster 6502.
Oh, where they made it from scratch, where they made it with all the components, where you can see all the wire wrapping of all the transistors and stuff.
Right. So
that was at VCF, right?
It was at VCF. So
okay.
At VCF, we plugged his the processor, I guess, to this, and he was able to run Apple One. It was funny.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So it does work, like his stuff is really good.
So yeah, so that he did it that well.
Yeah.
You unminiaturize. You actually are now maximizing the components of the processor, right? So that's really interesting. No, this is cool. We don't always take super duper deep dives on hardware or techie type stuff on the show, or we don't do it as often as we probably should. And I know enough to be dangerous, but I do find this interesting. I know we have a few people on here a little bit more hardware savvy, and hopefully Jim Brain will come back when he gets. I think he was in outer space, and so there were some problems with sunspots and satellite transmissions. But who else on the panel right now has got 2 cents they want to add to some of this right now, who have some experience with hardware projects and Arduino type stuff? Anyone?
I was thinking Mark or Rick Adams might, because they both experiment with some of the hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of them, but Rick Adams has done some very practical hands-on stuff with his. So start with him.
Well, it's up to Rick.
Well, I've just done Raspberry Pi stuff, so not Arduino stuff.
We still like you.
Yeah, Jim's back.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah.
Well,
Jim,
so let me ask you a question, at some point, the small brain or the big brain, like the Arduino equivalent, gets too complicated and becomes where would you stop? We have the 8-bit processor in there emulating rest of it. We could use a PC to emulate the system hardware.
Yeah, now more than ever, I think it's gotten to be, it's very much a gray area. Back in the early 2000s, I started out using the AVR microcontrollers before the Arduino platform came into being, but I wanted to start in with microcontrollers again, and I was looking at the different things, PIC and so forth, and the Arduino or the AVR controllers were cheap and they were easy to program, and the compiler for them was free. Anyway, I started making projects kind of like you're working on here, where interfacing the classic types of environments. Mine was making peripherals for classic systems. And there's another individual in the retro community that a lot of people know. Her name is Jerry Ellsworth. She's the designer of the Commodore 64 DTV, and she did the Commodore 1, and she's been doing a lot of hardware stuff. I think she had a AR VR system a couple years ago that she was working on. Well, anyway, we'd go to these classic shows, and she'd make fun of me all the time because she'd say, when are you going to grow up and start doing hardware stuff, And so I kept making fun of her, one of these days, software is going to just supplant the need to actually have any of this hardware, reprogrammable hardware, whatnot. And really, it was a bit of a joke because at the time, 16 megahertz just isn't fast enough to do everything you want to do at full speed or whatnot. And the FPGA type stuff that she was doing obviously could run, 40. Well, it could run a lot faster. It could run gigahertz or whatever, right? And so, it was kind of good-natured ribbing. But as time moves on, you've got CPUs that have gotten up to be very, very fast, like ARM chips and whatnot, that have gotten into the gigahertz range, but yet they're able to be used in real time. So it's not like a full PC. It's like an Arduino platform, but it's running at a gigahertz or something like that. And it starts to become like you're describing, where you can just write some code and you can emulate a classic machine that runs up to maybe 10 or 20 megahertz or whatever, no sweat. And then on the other hand, one of the things that we also need to realize is that, because here the last few years, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I finally was like, okay, I'm tired of Jerry making fun of me, so I'm going to learn to do this hardware part. And so I started learning Verilog, and of course VHDL is the other part of that. But Verilog is like almost like C code, and VHDL is a little bit different. But essentially, you're writing code and then you're downloading it to a chip. So either way, either if you choose to do the Arduino or the Raspberry Pi or whatever route, and you write code and you compile it using a C compiler, and then you run it on this platform, or you go over here and you get into your favorite Verilog or VHDL editing tool, and you edit or create some Verilog or whatever, and then you download it into this chip. Either way, you're essentially downloading a program into a chip, and at the end,
it's all coding.
It's all coding, right?
Yeah.
So pretty soon, as they get, I think over time, those are just going to get closer and closer together, and so you're just going to write this code that you've been writing. You create your libraries. And just like people do today with the Arduino things, they're going to say, well, I want this LCD screen thing, and I want this audio thing, and I want to emulate the SID, and I want to do the VIC chip, or I want to do the Gimme or whatever. And they're just going to stuff it all into a project, and they're going to hit compile and program, and it's going to shove it into a chip. And they don't really know what's in the chip, but at the end, it emulates the whole thing. I mean, it emulates whatever they want it to emulate. And they don't really know whether it was software downloaded to the chip or whether it's programmable hardware downloaded to the chip. And quite frankly, they don't care.
Hey, Jim, I'd heard that some of the FPGA manufacturers had licensed the ARM cores. And so there's supposed to be some hybrid ones that have like...
Yes, there is, which is kind of... That's right. And that's really, that's like Inception level stuff, right? Because you have a programmable hardware running a piece of essentially running software, which is a CPU, and then you're downloading a program into the CPU, which is emulated using the hardware that you created using a program. So you're like, right? I mean, it is.
You have libraries for the ARM. You can leverage those existing libraries just by
That's right.
adding hardware that can't be done fast enough in hardware. And then part of it's dedicated to emulating the CPU that you can get the libraries for.
What DEFCON level are you at, Stevie?
Funny thing is I'm kind of following along right now. We're not talking about disassembling anything here, so I'm still good. So
I think it's exciting time to be a hobbyist, in my opinion. I mean, I don't want to take away from the topic of the day, but when I was in college, I graduated in 1993, and I worked actually on a hardware project, kind of like these things, when I was in my senior year of college. And so if you go online and you search for Power Glove serial interface, you'll find my name and whatnot back from the day. And I helped develop that piece of hardware back in the day, but it was painful to develop that hardware. The main CPU that you used at the time was the 68HC11, which ran at 8 megahertz, but was divided by 4 internally. So it essentially was a 2 megahertz machine. And on top of that, the programming tools were kind of antiquated, not nearly as nice as they are today. And then if you wanted to lay out a board, like, you got these little RetroShield boards, and they look really professional. And I mean, they are really professional, right? And they look, and you probably have a copy of KiCad or a copy of Eagle, and you put those together yourself or whatever. Yeah. Back in the day, I had to work for a long time to hire a company to lay out the printed circuit board. And they cut me a deal and only charged me $1,000 to lay out the board because they were going to help train one of their new employees. And if they would allow them to do it all through the summer, they would only charge me $1,000 to do it or whatever. And then when it was done, I found a bug in the, boo-hoo me. I found a problem in my layout, and it was another $400 to fix the layout. And then when you went to do the boards, you had to mail the actual, we printed out on transparency paper, the actual Gerber pictures or whatever, and I had to put them in a special envelope, a padded envelope, and mail them somewhere, and somebody would make the printed circuit board and mail it back. It was an arduous process. And now, like, you design your board up in the comfort of your own home. You zip up the files, you email it off to somebody in the wherever, right? Whoever's got a cheap price, and they build the boards. They build you like 5 of them for $10, and they mail them back to you in a week, and you didn't even have to leave your basement, right? It's awesome.
Yes, it's great. I agree. Yeah, and it's just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and more accessible.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think this was an early topic we had too. I think it was around episode 19 or 20 we first started talking about emulated hardware, back when the Matchbox CoCo was a thing, and we're talking about that and the CoCo FPGA, and the very fact that you can write software to program hardware. That in itself is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. When you just think about like everything Jim just said, like think about the old computers, how things had to be designed and built and assembled, and now it's all kind of virtualized in hardware. It's mind-boggling, and really it's a different flavor of emulation, right? It's either software-based emulation or hardware-based emulation, but it's emulation, right? No matter how you slice it. I think the difference, and in both cases, you have to understand, like, as somebody who's developing hardware in MAME, they still have to understand how the hardware works, right? They still have to understand how this chip talks to that chip and all these things. So that understanding of the hardware and electronics must exist for both software and hardware-based emulation. Is that a true statement?
That is a very, very true statement.
Right. So in a way, you're still kind of designing things, but now the ability to design, it's just a whole nother level, right? We can design from the comfort of our chairs.
Yep. We do need to, one of the things I see, because in my day job, I work in a manufacturing company, and I'm in the IT department, and I do some hiring of senior resources. And one of the things that I'm struggling with now is there's a generation of people that are coming to the workforce, and they've never really interacted with hardware in an appreciable way. And I know the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino are attempts to try to get people back into that, and they're great attempts, and I hope they're it looks like they've been very successful, and I hope they continue to be very successful. But there has been a period where people just assumed that everything would be driven by Windows or Linux or whatever, and the challenge is that there is a level of general, I guess, kind of intelligence that is impressive and capable and of good use in an IT type position or whatnot, that I think is developed more strongly if somebody has access to the hardware, being able to, even if it's not retro hardware, but still just being able to see that it's not just magic that happens in your PC, in your laptop's case, right? There's signals, and there's data bits and all that, and there's an order to them. And if you violate the rules, then you get unexpected behavior and whatnot. And especially when things, because this happens in the real world, just as it does in the retro environment, we have things in our manufacturing floor that are obsolete. The companies went out of business or whatever, but the product still works. It's a laser cutter or a mill or whatever, right? And you still need it to work. And so sometimes you have to go out there and say, well, I can't talk to the people who designed this, so I'm going to have to essentially reverse engineer it, just like you would do, like you're saying, Steve, for MAME in a retro machine. You've got to get the hardware, you got to poke and prod at it for a while, and you got to figure out what it does. And then you have to recreate that in a piece of software or whatever to emulate enough of it so that your mill or your laser cutter or whatever will continue to work. There's going to continue to be a great value to people who can do that, or at least understand how to do that. And I think projects like this continue to help people refine those skills. I mean, it's fun, the 6809, 6502 and whatnot, but at the end of the day, I feel like they're getting a skill that they can translate into the workforce. And at least from my perspective, if they say, yeah, I did stuff like this, it's going to give me a little bit more comfort that when the shop floor or plant floor is down and not functioning, and we got to have somebody that walks in and try to figure out what's going on, the person's armed with all of this knowledge of how to debug, diagnose, reverse engineer, whatever, to get it back up and running as quickly as possible. Cool.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, just to add to that a little bit, like there's a lot of good documentation on, old, these older computers. You get the whole schematics, you get a lot of details on how the chips work, how the OS works. You get the commented, OS details itself. Nowadays, a lot of that stuff is missing, and you just push buttons and magic happens. And if it doesn't happen, then you're kind of stuck.
Yep.
Which, yeah.
Get off my lawn, right?
Yeah, well, we had, what was his name? We had Guru Santiago on a couple of weeks ago, who's working on some high-end modern stuff, and he's like, nobody understands how a CPU works anymore. Where he had actually lived in a time where he helped develop some custom CPUs that helped with the space shuttle navigation or whatever it was, telemetry with liftoff. So there was a time where he was influential in designing a processor, but he's like, at this point, we don't know how they work. There's just too complex for any one person to grasp.
And then that's true of software too. I mean, a lot of people now write software and they're just making API calls. They have no idea what's going on under the hood in the API call. If there's a bug in there, you're stuck with it.
Well, and I was going to say too, talking about that skill translating to the workplace. It's difficult. I guess more difficult to take someone, whether it's a student, for example, a kid that's interested in the STEM field, and teach them 64-bit assembly language. And that's very complex. Whereas if you could start out and had some sort of platform like this and teach them 8-bit assembly language and then graduate them up, I mean, one day they may be able to understand how a bootloader works.
Mm-hmm. True. Very much.
Yeah. Baby steps. It's pretty cool. Do we have more to show off, AirTurk, from your presentation, or?
I think that's all. We covered a lot of stuff. I do want to ask. I started looking at the Nitro OS 9 stuff.
You're wasting your time there.
Yeah. I was gonna put it in a nice way.
Well, we have a guy here who knows a little something about that. On the panel, L. Curtis.
I will just send him a setup. How's that?
No, well, go ahead. You've got a great resource right now. Go ahead and ask your question.
That's actually what I want to do. Find somebody who knows this stuff, and we bring it up. I mostly support hardware.
I know there's been a couple of ports of the Nitrous 9 kernel to some other custom hardware projects that people have made too. So you wouldn't be the first one to do that either. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just gotta find out what the hardware requirements are, like timers, hard drive support, and things like that, and then emulate it. Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty wide swath. I mean, OS 9 is a modular system, so there was all kinds of hardware for different floppy controllers and hard drive controllers and different video chips, because it was not just for the CoCo stuff. I mean, that works in the FM7, the FM77, a whole bunch of other machines too.
Which do you think would be, if you wanted to emulate an environment to run OS 9, like level 1, for instance, what do you think would be the simplest OS 9 capable environment to run?
Probably a terminal-based one, to be honest, which sounds like what he's doing already.
So what
Boise did one of those.
What platform would that be? What FM77, FM7? Which one would be a terminal-based environment that he could maybe do a search on?
I'm trying to remember, because Boise had a couple in the source in the GitHub repository. There's already some terminal-based projects that are OS 9 level 1 based. I just can't remember the name of them off the top of my head.
Well, we can get you that. Yeah, we'll get you that. So that should be easy for us to figure out. And then you can just look at the hardware requirements for that environment and try to emulate that. And,
yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
And then you'd be a lot closer to being able to bring OS 9 up. Level 1 anyway. Level 2 it's a significantly larger effort.
MMU hardware support and all kinds of things too. So.
Yeah, that's too much for Arduino for sure.
That's cool. David Ladd, are you with us? David, do you copy? We don't know where David's probably frying something up somewhere. I just wanted to get some input from him on his Arduino project, his PS2 keyboard mouse adapter thing.
I can give you a little bit of detail on it because I have a copy of it here. It's an Arduino sketch. PS2 to he doing the mouse functionality and converting it to the CoCo's mouse inputs. with enough resolution to do, what's the high resolution program, a paint program that you can use on the CoCo?
Color Max.
Okay. Yeah, so his goal was to create enough resolution so that you could do the high resolution capabilities on Color Max using just the it's high resolution capabilities, but there's a program Nick may be on. Simon and folks created that special routine that lets you to get like 1024 or 10 bits of
Nick
resolution.
and John Kowalski did that one.
Kowalski, sorry.
And I recall.
David wanted to make sure that he could target that. So whoever used that routine that would give you that enhanced resolution, his adapter would work on that. And I think right now he's looking for someone who can kind of take it to production. He's kind of developed it as a project and kind of put it out there, and maybe hoping that some folks want to move forward with it as a product. I've talked to him a little bit about an idea of kind of working with it, and then also maybe adding in a capability to switch joystick ports or something, so that you can plug it into both joystick ports and then be able to have your PS2 mouse work on either one of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Just kind of, make it a little bit easier so you don't have to fumble in the back of the machine for connectors, plugging connectors in and all the time. But he uses the Arduino, same system that is being used here. He uses that same type system, but he's developed a custom board that he uses, like an Arduino Uno type board, not the Mega. So he uses like AT Mega 168 or 328 or whatever.
Mark D's holding it up, it looks like.
Yeah.
Nano. It's actually a micro, but it's a nano, same size board.
Yeah.
So it's the current one.
Yeah, and it's got like a Mega 328 or something on it, or what?
28p.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a smaller CPU than's on the Arduino Mega, because the Mega has got like a 1281 or something like that, a much larger chip with 128K of RAM. This one's got like 32K, but then again, it's doing a lot less.
I've been working with David on this, and I have a lot of the hardware to build this stuff already. Actually, the Mega the Micro was going to be used for advanced feature, which I don't think we're going to need that for the software high-res interface.
Okay, cool.
Also, I just wanted to mention in the chat there, James Jones, who used to work for Microware, the guys that made OS 9 originally, and are still doing it now for more modern systems. He's mentioning some other 6809 OS 9 based systems like the Gimmicks, the Smoke Signal, Chieftain, SW, TPC, some SS50 and 50C bus systems are all also capable of running OS 9 on terminals. So I don't know if the source code for those versions of OS 9 is kicking around, or for those particular serial chips or not, but
I have the Gimmicks 9 running actually on my older board, so that was the first thing I was going to try.
Okay. Yeah, because Gimmicks is actually a big OS 9 user back in the day.
I see.
Is there a reproduction of the SS50 that somebody's making, like a replica or whatever? Because I'm thinking if there is, that person might be somebody to chat with as well.
I don't know if there's not.
I'll look it up and see.
Cool. Have we done a decent job of talking about, or letting you talk about your project a little bit there, Araturk?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh no, thank you.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So remind us again what the main website is if people want to check out this project.
The best thing is the GitLab project website, which is gitlab.com/8bitforce.
Okay. Which I'll post in the chat again.
I have a personal website, like blogging type of website at www.8bitforce.com. It's all these 8-bit microprocessors.
Yeah, 8bitforce.com. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good start. From there, you can dive into all the other ones.
Okay. Well, hopefully I've posted the link in a few places too. So for those who are watching it live, you'll be able to see the. Okay, Mark Overholzer. Okay.
It's been a couple times, so.
Yeah. All right. So we're posting a link to that. Now that's a very cool project, and it's kind of neat where you can tinker with different CPUs and get some electronic stuff going on and stuff like that. So that's some pretty cool stuff.
I had to finish it up. I got the name. So for folks wanting to know, not necessarily for the hardware, but the individual might be able to help you with platform, emulation or whatnot. There's a company, the guy goes to VCF East a lot of times, and I think he's been to VCF Midwest. He might be there again this year. The company's name is Corsham, Corsham, and the website is corshamtech.com. And he makes a replica of the SS50. And I think it's a like Curtis mentioned, it's a terminal-based system. And so he's got one all set up. And I think he probably would have a copy of level 1 running on that environment. And so he could tell you, he probably has a real good idea of how much of the SS50 you need to emulate in order to get OS 9 up and running.
I think I've seen it. Yes, he had some medical problems, if I remember right.
He did. He did, but he's on the mend, and I don't think he's shipping products right now. But if you just, it sounds like you're mainly looking for information, and he can do that from where he's convalescing, or if he's just trying to get back into the swing of things, it should be easy for him to provide that information.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, this has been a great segment. I literally enjoyed it. I'm not just saying that. I'm not a hardware guy, but I enjoyed it.
Way to sell it, Stevie.
Yeah, no, I'm
literally enjoyed it.
I literally enjoyed it, and genuinely enjoyed that. I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to the hardware, but I've become more knowledgeable by listening to the smart people here. I'm the fish that follows the smart people. So I've been able to follow this pretty well. So that's good.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks a lot.
And feel free to hang out with us. We're gonna probably just take a brief break, and then we're gonna go on to talk about some other things. But thanks for being here, Air Turk, and you're welcome. And whenever you have an update, or you just want to, if you've got nothing better to do on a Saturday, you can come join us anytime you like. All right. So
I think I might do that, actually. This is a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh, nice. And I'll tell more jokes. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good.
I know a lot of jokes. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. Well, we're going to take a brief commercial break, and then we'll come back and talk about a few more things. And something I've been negligent to do, we're going to start off by thanking our patrons. Okay. So let us thank our patrons right now. We got lots of patrons. These are the actual supporters of our show. So how about we give a big thank you, a warm thank you to Al Hartman and Alan Huffman and Blair Leduc and Brendan Donahue and his CoCo VGA project, and Brian Joyce at Extructus.com, and our good friend Fedor Stamen all the way in Denmark, and D. Bruce Moore in Canada with some of his projects like fod.gracenote.ca and cocoforever.gracenote.ca. We got David Mitchell. We've got Diego and his cool site, yaccs.info, yet another colorcomputersite.info. Diego's got some cool stuff there. Disney Saints fan and Eric Canales at color-computer.com. Grant Leedy, Jason Downs, Jenna Furin, Ken Reichert at canmakeit.com. Kyle Eder, Malfunct, Paul Fiscarelli, Frenemythic, Paul Shoemaker, Richard Lorbieski, Boyson Tech, BOYSONTech.com. Rob Inman, Steve Bjork, Terry Steggy, The Backyard Shed Gang, Tom C., and Tom S. All sponsors of the show. Thank you all. You are all too kind.
Hello, I'm David Ladd. Thank you for watching CoCoTALK, the world's leading live CoCoTALK show.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. It's Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. Gameplay.
To get your copy of a Gameplay Goodness Color Computer Gaming DVD today, head on over to 8bit256.com. There you will find several DVDs featuring color computer gameplay videos by the Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. So to get your very own copy of a Gameplay Goodness Color Computer Gaming DVD, head on over to the Retro Swag Shop at 8bit256.com and tell them the Original Gamer Stevie Stroh sent you.
It's a Radio Shack Merry Christmas.
This year, I needed to give a real family pleaser.
Honey, please help me with this budget.
How about a new game, Dad? Please.
And I found it. Radio Shack's Color Computer 2. On sale for just $99.95. It entertains, educates, manages, it's expandable, and affordable. Now that really pleases me.
The Color Computer 2. Sale priced for Christmas. Only at Radio Shack.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tim. Playing Dagger like that idiot from the book. You're watching CoCoTALK.
From Radio Shack, the TRS-80 Model 3. And at $200 off, it's a great value. Select from Radio Shack's huge program library to aid your children's education. Plan your personal and household budgets. Or to entertain with fast-action games. You can even learn to write programs. The TRS-80 Model 3, on sale for $7.99. Only at Radio Shack and Radio Shack Computer Centers, the computer experts.
We now return you to CoCoTALK.
And we're back. Much to Jim Brain's disappointment, we are back. We are on the air. And welcome, everybody. And so we have a topic this week, which hopefully will be as entertaining as our first segment. But we were going to talk about the CoCo community evolution, right? I think that was our suggested topic. How have things changed in the past week or two, right? We will get to project updates and acquisitions as well. We kind of we're playing with the format. We ask and we listen and we ask people for suggestions on the show. And it was suggested on our Discord server that maybe we don't spend as much time at the top of the program telling everybody what we did this week and what our favorite color was and all that kind of stuff and what color keys we want on our new CoCo 3 keyboard. But we bumped that later on. So we got to our main segment right away. Thank you, Air Turk, for doing that. We have a host discussion topic, which was suggested by Steve Bjork, who unfortunately cannot be with us today. But I thought it was a great suggestion. And so the idea is how has the CoCo community evolved from the old days to the new days? And there's enough mixtures of us here. Some of us were active in the early days of the community, and some of us are new, like myself. And so we probably have lots of, and Mark D. Overholzer. So we probably have lots of different perspectives on this. So we're going to go ahead and open the floor. Maybe we start with, I'll put you guys on the spot, but probably Rick Adams and Curtis Boyle, and then probably even Nick Marentes are some guys who have been some of the pioneers of some early events, like especially going back to like Penn Fest and Rainbow Fest and stuff. So where do we want to begin with this? Like what was the community like in the glory days? Anybody want to start with that?
Rick?
Well, I suppose I could start. Yeah. No pressure. Yeah.
Thank you. You're too kind.
Why are you here,
You're
Rick?
way too kind. Yeah. Not kind enough. Okay. In the early days, there wasn't much to speak of. You might know a Radio Shack manager that would know of a local users group. Among my circle of friends, it was a little different. In that we had like about 5 people at work that got color computers, and I was looking for I was actually looking to get an Atari ST, and my friend Dale Lear at work talked me into getting a color computer. So we got about 5 people that got color computers, and so we are our instant own users group, and Dale was a real go-getter, and so we looked at we had the Falsoft magazine and Rainbow, and so we all had subscriptions to that. So we had our own user group. There were local user groups that we would go to from time to time, which mostly tended to be hotbeds of pirating games. And,
hey, it's 30 years on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Dale and I showed up to one of our local user groups, and while Dale was talking to the guy that ran the users group, one of his compatriots was behind Dale, taking a program pack from his backpack and taking it over to copy it, and it wouldn't copy. So he comes back to Dale and says, "Hey, your game, it won't copy." And Dale says, "Give me that."
Your game won't copy.
Yeah, how dare you? Really. So, and Dale, by that time, he had sent on a double back to Tandy, and he was in touch with Marty Goodman. Marty Goodman lived in the South Bay area, which was a little, bit south of us. So he had Marty on the phone all the time, and he would, hey, you want to talk to Marty Goodman? I'm like, Marty Goodman, he writes for Rainbow Magazine. I can't talk to him. I'm a nobody, Oh, go ahead, give it a try. What could it hurt, So, hi, Marty. What's up? So there was that, and then there was the Delphi days. So Delphi started. I guess the CoCo SIG on Delphi started. Looks like it started August of '85, and so I looked at they had a double-page ad on Rainbow Magazine of get on Delphi, it'll be wonderful, it'll be awesome, and this was all new, all this online stuff to us. So I stared at that double-page ad for getting on Delphi for about a year, and then finally got on Delphi, and so there was that going on. Lots of discussion of, I got on there and they said, oh, well, he wrote Temple of Rom, so maybe we want to get a hold of this guy. So they made me, part of the staff of, Delphi, CoCo SIG. So I was like the database manager. I don't even remember quitting that, but I did. And they closed that down. Looks like it was April of 2001.
Wow, from 85 to 2001, we're talking about 15 years?
I think it's maybe 16.
16, yeah. So
was Delphi a paid service like CompuServe?
Yes.
Sure was, yeah.
Along with Genie, CompuServe, and a few others, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. CompuServe was too rich for my blood, so I actually was on. It says my internet connection is unstable. Am I doing okay?
Your audio's coming through. Your video's getting a bit jerky, but
okay. So yeah, I was on CompuServe a little bit, but the only reason I could afford Delphi was that since I was on staff, they gave me a free account, but it still did cost me. So. And then I remember at the end, Dale and I decided, well, they've discontinued the color computer, and so we sort of got out of the scene. And then much later, I came back. So that's my story.
All right. So you mentioned yourself and Dale Lear very casually, but you guys developed some of the earliest commercial, kind of blockbuster games for the CoCo back in the day,
right.
Which is very cool. So you've got a relationship with Tandy and software and all kinds of stuff. That's a perspective that I think most people don't have. So that's really interesting to see that take on it. Very cool stuff. Yeah. I had a club, a local computer club. That was my experience, growing up. We had the Radio Shack store, the people maybe you met there, and then we had the computer club. So you didn't feel completely isolated, but I don't think I had any clue on the bigger picture of what it was like to be at a Rainbow Fest or anything like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
There was Rainbow Fest, and then there was like the BBSs.
Yeah, and I missed the whole online train completely on the CoCo. I don't know why, it just didn't really appeal to me. I wasn't that interested. I got more into BBSs on like the Tandy 1000 and stuff.
Developers tend to interact with each other. Like I know you knew Dale. What other developers did you interact with?
A little bit with Steve Bjork. Other developers, that is about it. Yeah, there's and there's Marty, and then I would interact with the Fallsoft people at the Rainbow and the Delphi booth at Rainbow Fest, and I think that's about it for developers. Yeah.
Well, so
I often wondered.
Can you give us a kind of encapsulation? So now we're in the Facebook era. We got Facebook, we got Twitter, we've got a ton of online services that are just kind of our fabric. But in the Delphi time, not everybody was online. Number one. Number two, this was a electronic community that you were a member of. What was the chemistry like there compared to what it's like now? Like now in social media, you can get the gamut of how people treat each other with civility and lack of civility and all kinds of other things. What was the climate like in the Delphi days with these online personas and posting? Were there controversies? Were there wars? Would people tear apart a post and things like that? I missed that train. So,
yeah, there were most of the time everybody was really, really civil with one another. There were little controversies and little wars and things like that. There was a lot of sort of good-natured competition between the CompuServe people and the Delphi people, but that was pretty, civilized.
That was tongue-in-cheek for the most part.
Exactly. Yes.
Kind of like college rivalries, like Florida State versus.
There's a lot of common people on both groups too. Like in my case, I did CompuServe because up here in Canada we had an extra charge. Like you had the standard Delphi CompuServe charge, but then we had to do what was called data pack. Add an extra $9 an hour to whatever your existing fee was. So it was really expensive up here. And in my case, CompuServe actually ended up doing a direct line into the city where I'm in. So all of a sudden the price dropped in half, which is why I did CompuServe, not Delphi, because Delphi never did that. But yeah, there was a bit of a friendly rivalry, but a lot of the same faces were on both of them anyway. So it wasn't too bad. And also I think one thing different compared to say with Facebook now is that moderators on both Delphi and CompuServe and even Genie and some of the other ones that also had CoCo communities was a little bit more strict. Like if you started going too far off the rails or started, personalizing attacks on people, they would just cut you off and shut you out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There was none of this letting it ride and, go on for weeks and months.
Yeah.
We would have controversies and sort of little battles and stuff, mostly revolving around one person or a number of people just not understanding each other online and not really understanding what the other person was getting at. And a lot of times it would get pumped up by all of the factions' little fanboys. It's sort of like
one thing I will mention too, Marty seemed to be at the center of quite a few of these.
Marty was a really kind of a controversial, poke it with a stick kind of a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He liked to poke the bear.
Yep. But usually what would happen is that the two people that were fighting would actually call each other on the phone.
Oh, wow. Imagine that.
And suddenly discover that they completely had nothing to fight about. Even though they would be surrounded by groups of people on either side that were like, cage match, yes, fight. They would get on the phone, they would hash it out, and they would suddenly discover that there was nothing to fight about whatsoever, that one had completely misunderstood the other, and it would all be good. And this happened like 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting involved in some of these little tussles, and I wasn't always the most mature person back then. I'm not always the most mature person now, but I'm better. So that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
And I'll be better still in the future. So
always growing.
Yeah. Yep.
All we can do is hopefully continuously improve our code, right? So.
Yeah. I wanted to get into a bit more of the earlier community too. I don't know if you guys had the same experience that have been around since like the CoCo first came out. Like Rick mentioned, though, I mean, like you'd go to Radio Shack and sometimes a manager would turn you on to a users group. In our case, I happened to randomly meet a couple other CoCo users and we formed the users group between 3 of us. But there was also like in our high school, and this is one thing I really liked about ours. I don't know if others had the same experience, but they were realizing that computers were getting popular. They had a few pets and Cable 2s and stuff. And but they know that a lot of the students were getting all kinds of different computers because there was Ataris and Sinclairs and all kinds of things. So they were buying subscriptions to some of the generic magazines in the school library, like Creative Computing and Byte. And they'd have an article or 2 on every computer basically as you went through. So that was one way where a lot of us were learning how to do things, was that there was these generic computer magazines that you get programs for all these different computers.
Yep. Yep.
So a lot of us did that. BBSing, I started in that, I think late 1982 is when I first started doing some BBSing stuff. And there wasn't any CoCo specific BBSs until the next year. At one point here in Saskatoon, and I mean, at the time we were a city of 150,000. I think we had 6 CoCo based BBSs. We had about 35 BBSs total, but the CoCo was actually one of the more popular ones.
That's interesting.
I already talked about, CompuServe. For me, CompuServe at the beginning, I think was pretty, like Dave Phillipson, author of Supercom here, mentioned that he thought Delphi was better for technical. I think later on that was definitely true. I think because it was cheaper for Delphi users, especially in the States, that they would go, and a lot of them started congregating more in Delphi, so your quality of the people followed it. I think in the early 80s, though, I think, and even the first year or two, the Delphi had a CoCo Sega. Definitely CompuServe was the place to be. And Genie had its own too. The other one I wanted to mention, at the very beginning, before Rainbow, before Color Computer News and all these color computer specific magazines come out, there were a couple besides Byte and Creative Computing, but there was also like the World of 6-8 Microjournals, which actually covered the 6-800 and up and had been around for a couple years before the CoCo came out. But they actually had a CoCo section like right within the first couple months. In fact, they're the first ones that explain how to copy ROM cartridges, going back to the story about poor Dale and his cartridge. The other thing I wanted to mention too, and I don't know how many of you were involved with this, but in the BBS scene, there was also FidoNet, which is a big, kind of almost like an internet, but based on microcomputers, all interconnected. And every night at 2 a.m, they'd call each other and dump messages for all the various forums back and forth. There was a CoCo forum, an OS9 forum, and then for all kinds of computers and other topics and stuff. It's almost like a Usenet type thing, but totally based on micros. And we had a version of a BBS called Ribs by Ron Byler that actually ran on the CoCo that was FidoNet compatible, so we could take part in this whole thing. And that was a lot of communication there. And of course, that was completely free because it was a local call to you. And then, at late at night when the rates were cheaper is when all these BBSs would talk to each other. So they never charged any of us for this. And that was a worldwide thing. So stuff was going across North America, to go across to Japan, to go across to Europe. And we did a lot of communication that way. And Rick, I'm guessing you probably used Usenet a bit in the day too to some of the groups.
Absolutely, yeah. Matter of fact, I ran my own Usenet node from my color computer.
Oh, cool.
As you might remember.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about that till you mentioned, but yeah, now that you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's also groups there for OS9 and CoCo and stuff too, Listserv, CoCo, and all kinds of stuff too. So that was another way a lot of us communicated back then too. And the magazines and the trade shows, as mentioned before, like PenFest and Color Expo and Rainbow Fest and everything else too. So there was a lot of ways to get communicated, and it grew kind of almost exponentially, I think, between the early 80s through the late 80s, and then it kind of started to die back down a bit as the computer got discontinued and all the bigger machines were, like the Macs and PCs, were taken over. But ironically enough, the last few years, it's seen a resurgence. It's actually growing again. It's not shrinking anymore. So that's the rather
when they discontinued the color computer, I mean, that hit us in the gut. It's like, well, the bottom just fell out. So and so then Dale and I left, and a lot of you guys stayed. So everybody says, well, you did an actual game for Tandy, you must be pretty special. And I'm like, no, you guys are the special guys. I dropped out for many years. So Delphi, just before they pulled the plug on Delphi, somebody, I guess it's Alan Weston, did a dump of every message that he could get a hold of on Delphi. And so that's available in the Color Computer Archive, a database of all those messages. And so just recently I put those on the web.
Yeah, so we're going to show that off.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I just want to we'll show that off on all its glory, and I'm really interested in that too. No, you don't have to move on. Just reminding you.
We want to spotlight it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I will mention Alan West. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
It was interesting. It's like I looked just now, and so I had there's 859 messages from me in there, and there's 856 from York. So I beat him. Actually, that's not necessarily true, because there's a lot of messages that are missing. So So it's not necessarily true.
It's not.
And Steve was a 6809er back then, wasn't he?
Yes, 6809er was
6809er.
His username.
The times of handles. Yeah.
Dale and I were uninspired. My handle was Rick Adams, and his handle was Dale Lear. So
yeah.
And see, that was easier to use in CompuServe. You had those stupid numbers. Like mine was 71310, 71.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'll never have to remember.
and
That's
then
funny.
Dale Lear had I see 88 messages. So I don't know. I'm thinking that he had more than that, and they must be missing.
There's a bunch missing. I mean, when Alan dumped that, he also dumped the Oceanside BBS message logs as far as he could. He also dumped CompuServe, and actually, I've got those on my website, just not interactive like you're working on. We'll discuss later, but I just have dumps of the messages. But I know there's a ton of stuff that I wrote even during that time frame that's not on there. So it's intermittent, I guess, is how full the
it's still nice to have, just like we were talking about earlier, preserving the CPUs, to preserve some of this human interaction that's taken place in the history of
Well, the
this
thing that
machine.
both those communities had too was they had file upload download areas too, where people were submitting software like crazy or patches. Else, and a lot of that stuff has been lost. I mean, some of it's on RTSI, and some of it's managed to keep. And
Yeah.
But there's chunks I know that I used to have that are gone. My floppies don't work, and nobody else seems to have them. So there's a lot of software that got lost.
Yeah. I that's kind of, not to get off too far off topic, but the whole fact of uploading software to bulletin boards, that's how I was by chance able to come across my game Cosmic Aliens that I thought I'd lost forever. It made its way to the internets. So yeah, it's kind of cool that we can preserve stuff. Cool. So we've heard from Rick. Rick's had an interesting Glory Days stuff in the CoCo community, and we heard from Curtis. And before we move on to some other people, so we look at the 80s and the 90s, right? And so I think with the relevant period of the CoCo 3 probably faded towards the end of the 90s or early 2000s, maybe. When can we say that the CoCo kind of went dark for a little bit? Would you say late 90s, early 2000s?
Well, Delphi and CompuServe both shut down or amalgamated their CoCo sections. Like there used to be a separate OS9 CoCo and a separate CoCo for the RSTAW stuff, and they kind of shrunk them together. And then because the community was shrinking, the FidoNet system, I think that went on till probably the early 2000s. I think, where you could still get those, and then those kind of died down. I think even Usenet kind of went down in usage at that time.
Did
So
CoCo 3 get killed by Radio Shack by Tandy?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if we had to pick an arbitrary year where we could say the CoCo kind of went offline, the CoCo or the CoCo community or anything else, was there a particular year where we could say where things got really, really quiet and maybe were almost non-existent?
Say the early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
When Rainbow went under, and Rainbow lasted to what, 93 or something, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Then Frank Swagger came out with the World 6-8 Micros, and he kept that going for multiple years, and he had several hundred subscribers, and it became a kind of a replacement magazine, homemade, and it had a lot of really good stuff, and a lot of us subscribed to. There was actually a few of these other magazines that went through, and that kind of kept the community going. But after a while, even that died down. So once those started to die off, the homemade magazines, I think that's when it really started to go.
Yeah, it's actually amazing the CoCo lasted as long as it did. It came out in 1980. The CoCo 3 was released around 86, and then it was retired around maybe 91.
91, 92. Something like that.
So you're talking about 10 or 11 years when it was still a mainstream commercial product. That's a significant period of time just in itself right there. So we had 10 years of officially Tandy-fueled time. And then probably another 10 years of momentum that was just carried on by everybody until maybe it started to idle a little bit. But now we're talking about 20 years, so we're getting into the early 2000s. That's pretty impressive, right? How many of you went to some of the big events like a Rainbow Fest or a Pen Fest or some of these big heyday moments that a lot of us probably never got a chance to see?
I did. I first started going to Rainbow Fest in 1986. Which I think was one of the largest ones too, if I remember correctly. And then CoCo Fest, I went to Pen Fest 2000. That's the one that Nick actually came in flew to North America, and then we paid to ship him back.
Worth every penny, right? So, what were some of the numbers? I heard it was like in the thousands, like
It definitely was.
1,500, 2,000, 3,000 people.
Show.
Yeah.
Rainbow Fest in its heyday, I mean, the official numbers from Rainbow were around 12 to 15,000 at the biggest ones. But Steve has mentioned that was based on counting the 3 days together if it was the same people. It wasn't all the same people, so I'd say it's probably at least 6,000 to 7,000.
Wow.
It was full. It was in a much larger hotel than you're used to.
That's insane. It's hard to imagine. Other than like, yeah, I mean, even now, like maybe a Comic-Con, you get something big like that. But yeah, I don't know if the best vintage computing festival. Well, what did they say? You guys were at VCF West. What did they have, like 1,200 people for that weekend? VCF West seemed to be pretty big this year. That's actually a respectable number, right? The guys who were there a couple of weeks ago. Because I think there's definitely a resurgence where it's gaining momentum again. Who else on the panel has got some Glory Day memories? And then I kind of want to start to contrast some of that. Some of where we were we're at peak velocity. We started to idle. We were flatline for a little while, and then we'll talk about what's been happening since we've been coming back. Nick Marentes, how was your PenFest memories and experiences?
Actually, what I might do is I might start by saying about how I left the CoCo scene back in 92, 93. That was when Tandy discontinued the CoCo. And I was, disappointed, and I thought, well, that's the end of the CoCo, time to move on. So I packed up the CoCo, put it aside, and figured that was the end of the show. But around 1998, I think it was, I decided with the internet now, looking on the internet, I noticed there was a fair bit of CoCo activity coming up. And the thing that got me interested the most was when I saw John Kowalski's demos and some of the things he had created, which got me interested. I thought, well, this looks really good. This is very Amiga-like, some of the demos he'd done, and that got me interested because I wasn't an Amiga person as well. And that got me interested, and I set up the CoCo 3 again, and I started writing another game, and I released Pac-Man in late 98, I think it was, which also led for me to go to PenFest 99. And
from all your Pac-Man money?
No, that was that was before that. Yeah. But because of my Pac-Man itself, I was invited to come again in 2000, and this time I was a co-organizer of the of PenFest 2000. So things started to really boom. I could see the CoCo community was on the way up, and PenFest 2000 was pretty interesting. I always wanted to go to a CoCo Fest, reading about them all in the 80s, all the big ones, the Rainbow Fests and all that, all the famous personalities, I'd like to see Steve Bjork, for example, the guru of CoCo gaming or whatever, and I never saw that, but I had the chance in 1999 and then again in 2000 to be part of the fest, and PenFest 2000 was my glory day.
Right, and that was celebrating the 20th anniversary of the CoCo at that point. Yeah,
it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, can you imagine? It's hard to imagine. 20 years ago was the 20th. Yeah.
That's right. So
what were the numbers? What do you guys think the turnout was for that?
I seem to recall it was, and I do have the numbers because I was the co-organizer. I think we got about 120 individuals.
Okay.
That's counting them once.
Okay.
So in total, over the two and a half day period, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was pretty big because the CoCo Fests around that time were starting to wane, like Curtis said. Things were starting to bottom out. So with PenFest 2000, I wanted to try and see if I can rebuild it a bit, and we did. it actually came. The numbers improved. We had a pretty good show, and that kick-started a bit. Then I'm not sure what happened afterwards. I think it got quieter there, but then the whole retro community started to grow to the point where we're now seeing a big revival in the CoCo, in anything, Commodores and whatever. So it's a good time to play with the CoCo.
Absolutely.
Now.
Yeah.
I want to add one thing on the 90s too. Like after Tandy discontinued the CoCo and things had started to die down, we did get a brief resurgence 93, 94. And then through the late 90s, which included the Pen Fests, I think that was kind of the tail end of it, because that was when the 609 was discovered. And all of a sudden, here we have an accelerator now, basically. I mean, unfortunately, that seemed to be concentrated on the OS9 side of things only at that time. There was multiple products using it, but it actually did create a resurgence.
You started Nitrous 9 around 92, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Power Boost beat us by a couple of months.
Yeah,
so there was two competing products. But as far as the RS-DOS community, I mean, Roger Taylor did a few things with it, and one or two others did, I think, but not too many people did.
I think the 90s became the OS9 or Nitrous 9 peried.
Yeah,
that tended to take over, and I guess that's why
you
left.
bailed out. This is too smart for me. I'm leaving.
Well, for me personally, it didn't excite me, so I thought, well, this is dying, so I left. But when I looked back at it in 98, and I saw what Sockmaster was doing with the graphics and not OS9, I guess. I got excited again. I thought, well, this is good stuff. So that's what got me back. If it wasn't for Sockmaster's work, I wouldn't have come back probably.
Wow. So we have Sockmaster to thank and or scorn, depending on how you look at it, right? So
right. I mean, I was always into graphics, into games. So I mean, that was what interested me. If I was an OS9, I would have been the other way around. But I was into graphics, I was into sound, I was into that sort of thing, and that to me seemed like it was dying. So that's why I lost interest. But yeah, it's all coming back.
So when did CoCo Fest start? That was around 91, 92, right after the last Rainbow Fest, right? So was that around
92 would have been the first CoCo Fest.
92. So when CoCo Fest was like the annual pilgrimage for CoCo lovers, and so the Glenside Color Computer Club had the last Chicago CoCo Fest, which was supposed to be one more hurrah. There's no more Rainbow Fest, so let's just have a Chicago CoCo Fest, right?
The first Chicago CoCo Fest was actually mainly spearheaded. I mean, Glenside definitely helped quite a bit, but it was mainly spearheaded by Nancy Myers of CoCo Pro, which was a software vendor at the time, one of the main one we had left at that point. And they're the ones that kind of organized it the first year. They're the ones who got that started. And then Glenside took it over starting the second year.
Okay. Right. So around 91, we had CoCo Fest. And to their credit, and to this day, CoCo Fest is still here, right? I've been to 4 in a row now, past 4 years, but I just found out about it. I'm kind of a newbie to the community. But Glenside has been keeping the Chicago CoCo Fest alive for, what is this going to be now, the 29th?
9th, yeah.
29th annual, last Chicago CoCo Fest. 29 years they've been keeping that flame alive. That's pretty impressive. How many of you have been to some of the earlier CoCo Fest versus some of the newer CoCo Fest? Do you have any experiences to contrast and compare?
Well, as Nick mentioned, the 90s was basically the OS9 Nitrous 9 years.
Okay.
And Power Boost for the first couple of that. Plus, there was a lot. That was all the CoCo 4s too, like the MM1, the Tomcats, TC70, TC9, the System 4 and System 5, PT68K boards. So there was a lot of enthusiasm about the 68K based machines too. And then Chris Burke was working on the Rocket board, which is basically going to take one of those types of machines on a card to put into your CoCo itself, and then you'd get a kind of a dual hybrid machine. Unfortunately, orders to do the hardware. And as we were discussing earlier with Urtek and stuff, back then to do the hardware was hyper expensive, and you had to send off to get boards made for $1,000 for a sample and whatever else. So he needed a minimum of like 500 orders. I think he only made it up to 300 with deposits.
Wow.
So returned the money, and then we couldn't go any further than that, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it definitely kept things going. The CoCo 4 had a lot of enthusiasm, but once again, that was for the OS 9 people. And Nick's right. That decade was pretty well until the tail end of it was basically the OS 9 people were thriving like crazy.
Yeah.
This basically kind of died down, and then it kind of reversed in the 2000s.
And was that kind of considered the divide at that point, where you had the OS 9ers versus the RS DOSers?
It wasn't a divide on purpose. I think it was because people were trying to come out with new hardware to keep the CoCo community alive and to give us new stuff, hard drive controllers and no-halt floppy controllers and all this kind of stuff, the fancier hardware. And it was so much easier to write a driver for Nitrous 9 or OS 9. You just plop this in, you install the new hardware, and away you go. You don't have to change anything else. All your programs just run. Whereas, if you're trying to do that in Disk Basic, you had to do these kind of hack job things, and they weren't 100% compatible. And, sometimes things work, sometimes they didn't. We even hit that in the SDC occasionally these days, where you have to kick it back to Disk Basic to get certain programs to run properly. And on OS 9, for the most part, we didn't have to worry about that. You just, I replaced my old MFM drive with a SCSI drive or an IDE drive. I just replace it and swap the driver out, and voila, I'm up and running.
Well, yeah. Were there any kind of spats or personality clashes back in the older days, where individuals or groups or camps were less filling tastes great type stuff, or was it fairly civil in the 90s and early 2000s?
Well, there was the OS 9 Disk Basic divide. That I think it was more tongue in cheek. There was a few people that were kind of serious on both sides of it. Hi,
okay.
Nick.
Hi, Nick.
He's now a champion of OS 9, by the way.
As you can see, it's still there.
He's turned his coat.
Yeah. No, the only real controversies I remember was not based on platforms or even personalities per se. There were some bad business deals that went down that caused a bit of friction. There were some people that took money for orders that ordered a bunch of chips and stuff or upgrades or cards, and all of a sudden they disappeared.
Okay.
And that caused some bad blood with some of the community.
So what since you've been to more than one CoCo Fest, what was your most densely populated and sparsest CoCo Fest you were at, Curtis?
Well, the sparsest would have been the last one I went to when I took a break from the community. Well, I didn't take a break from the community as a whole. I stayed on the listservs, and I stayed on the internet stuff. My website, my game site and stuff started during this period too. But basically from 2002 on till we both went to the same CoCo Fest, your first one. The last one before I left, it had already been dying down as like this maybe 80 to 90 people. So it was just the diehards. But the very first few, there was hundreds of people at some of the ones in the early 90s. But nothing like Rainbow Fest. Rainbow Fest itself had shrunk quite a bit by the end too. But 86, 87, 88, like right after the CoCo 3 came out or just before, they were huge.
Right. And it's still getting 80 people together that's not a shameful number by any means. But luckily it has grown. The PenFest 2000 was a 20th anniversary celebration, and 120 people is not bad. But you would have hoped maybe you had more. But
we're almost back up to that again now.
Yeah. Now 20 years later, right? So it's taken that long, right? So. And
I know, I don't know if anybody in the panel here, but I remember talking to some of the people that had went to the shows between 2002, my last one in 2015. It had been down to 50 or 60 or something. I think it's
wow.
It was down pretty low.
But here's the thing though, the fact that it's lasted 29 years, even if there were 5 or 6 people, if you can get 5 or 6 people once a year and keep that going for 29 years, that's huge, right? So we really got to give Glenside a lot of credit for really, it's just been this thread that's been here forever. That's been part of the fabric of this, right? And they've been, it's really impressive when you think about it.
They still have their CoCo picnics too.
Yeah. So that's really cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my experience with what we now consider to be the community only goes back 4 or 5 years, and so I've got some newer experiences, but I have kind of assembled my own picture of kind of what I think how things were, not way back when, but maybe 5 years before till now, So I kind of have I have my own kind of image in my head of how things were, So it definitely seems like there was that time where things idled, maybe almost stalled, is just kind of quiet. We can definitely say that probably 2015 was the big year for kind of the reignition of things, right? So around that time is when, as the CoCo Crew podcast, they started the Google Plus group, the Facebook group. The mailing list never really went away, but it's kind of, I think it got a little bit with other forms of social media, got maybe more exposure put on it. So I mean, my history goes back to around 2015, which now we're looking at going on 5 years, and I have an idea of what things were like leading up to that. There were still some of the diehards that were around. I think some of the stuff that a lot of the projects that John Linville has been posting go back to like 2010, because some of his projects with like the CoCo video player and things like that. I think Farfall started around 2011. So I think it probably even started prior to that, but maybe that wasn't as visible. Maybe the light wasn't as bright. The sphere of influence wasn't quite as big, but I think it definitely has been growing momentum now. We're probably looking at 10 years of a slow build, and now it's kind of almost snowballed to the part where it's like exponential growth, it feels like. It feels like in the past 5 years, the size of the Facebook has grown, the size of the kind of the awareness and projects, hardware and software projects. It seems like every year we got more and more things to be excited about, especially these past 5 years. But I think where we are now has probably been about a 10-year path, right? That's about as far back as I can look and think I have an idea of, but you guys would have more perspective on that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head as to why it's been expanding. One is expanding on social media with Facebook and stuff that people can get onto much easier than trying to figure out an IRC channel or something, or getting on the listserv.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that new hardware, new software started coming out. Because from my understanding from the last few years in the late 2000s is that basically it was just people reselling stuff that had been out for years already.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Stuff. It almost became like a flea market.
Yeah.
There was nothing innovative or new coming on, and then some new hardware, new software, podcasts, etc., started coming online, and that's kind of picked up.
People on YouTube, So I mean, that's kind of what got me exposed or discovered too, was just putting stuff on YouTube, just as a new platform that probably had not been really deeply utilized. I think even some of the bigger retro, more well-known retro people on YouTube, they maybe don't go back much further than 2010 either, right?
I enjoyed I was watching gameplay videos for CoCo. That's how I found you guys, and there are a couple other guys who were putting play videos. Person named Martin Lee or Marlon.
Marlon Lee. Yeah,
he did a lot of CoCo YouTube play videos, and then so I watched his and I watched yours, and that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, so I think the internet, the modern internet, and what we'll call social media, and I'm going to include YouTube in on that. So YouTube and Facebook have probably been great assets to raising awareness, right? Getting more people involved. It's been an interesting ride.
Can I do a screen share?
Yes, go ahead, L. Curtis.
Find it here.
James Jones says, an annual picnic that the Glenside people held. Boise and I went to one, and on the way back went a bit nearer to a possible tornado than I would have liked, even for an Oklahoma boy. All right.
Somebody had asked what the CoCo picnic was, so James answered them.
Uh-huh.
So you guys seeing my screen there? That's
a
shot
the Rainbow Reporter.
86 rainbow. So that's just a shot of one of the hallway paths, and you can see it's pretty well wall-to-wall people. Like, you can't even move.
Yeah,
that's what I remember from Rainbow Fest in its prime, is that it was just wall-to-wall people. So let's go. Another one here with Dave Dyes, or that's the Radio Shack booth there on the right.
Disto, the super controller, huh? Free pictures for CoCo Max too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
Yeah,
good
here's another shot of
publication.
just one of the halls, one of the aisles, and there was multiple aisles going in both directions.
Atomic Software brings on the games, huh? Look at that, huh?
There's Dave
J&M.
Dyes in the front right there. That's the guy who wrote up most of the DICOM stuff.
Huh.
We got to be pretty good friends with him, me and Bill. But you can see, I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
your walking area was crowded. And this is while there's like 8 seminars going on at the same time that other people are attending.
Yeah.
So,
That's
I mean,
insane.
it's a world above what we're getting now. But, I mean, we're heading the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think something like VCF Midwest is probably one of the bigger shows. Like they've had to upgrade their venue at this point, right? So VCF East looked pretty good this year. I think if there's any takeaway or any free advice I could give is if anybody who's been on the fence about wanting to go to one of these things, or if you're not sure or you're not completely sold, you just do it. Just get it done. I mean, there's nothing like it. It really it's just like a whole nother level. If anything else, one of the benefits we have now with technology is we're definitely closer together. Like, look at what we have now. Look at what we're doing right now with Zoom. Right? We've got 12 of us right now. We're all live and interactive. It's almost like we're together. We're not quite, but it's pretty close. So. I think I think technology is bringing us closer together. Our community is global. Right here on the panel, we've got Australia and Canada. We've got Denmark. We've got the UK. We've even got California there with AirTurk. So, we've got, so it's real. I think it's really cool how we have all this stuff right now. And you hope, right? If right now we're talking about the past and the present, if we're going to project for the future, you would hope this will continue to grow and improve and hopefully become more positive, right? Chicago Rainbow Fest 1987 opens to thousands.
Over 12,000 people joined CoCoCat for the 13th Rainbow Fest.
Wow. Seminars and sandboxes were a hit, huh? Sandboxes, where you get to play in a sandbox? Wow, 12,000 people. That's just hard to imagine, right? I don't think even VCF Midwest is going to get 12,000 people. They might get 2,000. They might get 1,000. Yeah, I don't know, but who knows? That's still pretty cool, right?
Yeah. No, it was quite the show in its heyday. I mean, I've been to Comdex's. Obviously, it wasn't to that size, but it was
DICOM
big.
products. CoCoCat makes first appearance, huh?
Yeah.
CoCoCat is alive. OS9 Level 2 makes a splash. Wow.
Oh, look at that.
Color Max 3 debuts at Chicago show.
And there's Eric Gavreluk and Greg Miller who wrote Color Max.
Wow. Subscription software, T&D, huh? Computer Island. Wow.
Yeah, it's educational software. That's just an ad.
Tim Franklin just joined in. He says he's in one of these pictures here. So Tim Franklin's in Chicago.
There's a little in joke. Can you spot the MS-DOS user in this CoCo crowd?
Where's it? What? Can you see?
On the lower left there.
The MS-DOS user.
The MS-DOS user.
Where's that?
Oh, is it not showing up on the screen here?
Your screen is slightly clipped. There we go.
And Marty Goodman on the right, he was a keynote speaker. This is the 87 Chicago CoCo Fest.
Okay. What publication is this?
This is Rainbow.
Oh, this is from Rainbow. Okay. Bargains for everyone. HJL, Microcom, Disk Masters, Public Domain Software, Spectro Systems, Fraser Electronics. Wow.
Yeah. Sardis, David Weens, he's actually joined the CoCo group on Facebook too, that guy that did some of the floppy controllers that are mentioned over there. There's Dale Puckett back in the day.
Very cool.
It was a great show.
Yeah, it's great to see that we have some of the people from way back when have resurfaced and are, kind of around and accessible. It's very cool, right, to have access to the things you never have imagined, right, back in the day. Like, the people you meet at Rainbow Fest and having these conversations with Rick Adams, having him tell us about the good old days with him and his buddy Dale Lear and all these things. You never would have imagined you would be able to hear those stories in person, So it's really cool. They the access we have now too, which is very cool. That you just wouldn't have, who'd have thunk it back then, So yeah, I mean, obviously it seems like we've been on the rise for. It took the first 5 years was maybe a slow burn, but then these current 5 years that we've been on has really been an accelerated, very consistent. If you were to track that graph, it's going up, with no signs
attendance
of
is going up, new hardware, new software is going up.
Yeah.
Radio Shack's back.
Radio Shack is back, right? It's because of this show, CoCoTALK. We inspired them to reopen.
May not actually be true.
More outlandish lies. I love it.
Well, Jim Brain's a guy who's been around for a little while. What is your take on the past and the present of our community, and what do you think? Where do you think our future is going?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll start out. Good story, but it has a good ending. So I just want to start that.
Does that have anything to do with a big fish and a little fish? Big brain?
So I picked up my color computer was purchased at the VCF Midwest show, I think it was either 2013 or 2014. And I got along with some other classic machines, and I didn't do a lot with it, but the next spring I knew that there was a spring show called CoCo Fest that was in Chicago at the Lombard facility where they had VCF Midwest. And so I thought, well, I should go. And I think that might have been maybe it was 2015, may have been 2014. I don't know exactly. I have to look back on my receipts or whatnot. But I do remember the first time I showed up at the show, it was, great people, lots of Glenside folks and whatnot, but coming from the VCF Midwest show, which was kind of bursting at the seams down in that basement Lombard facility, I was concerned because I came and I thought, well, I remember camping out at one of the ends of the basement, that big room, and there was just a whole bunch of tables that didn't have anybody there, and so it was just free space. And I remember bringing my computer down and sitting it down there, and I was working on it and whatnot. And there was the usual suspects that you would expect to be there, kind of the anchor stores, I guess, so to speak. But it was kind of probably half full or maybe a quarter full of exhibitors and vendors and whatnot. And I thought, wow, because I'm used to some other platforms, and I'm thinking, man, is this kind of the end of the color computer kind of fan space or whatnot? Is this going to be the last time that they have the last CoCo Fest or whatnot? And so I started getting online and whatnot, and I'm not trying to point out that, I think I had anything to do with any kind of resurgence, but it does seem like about that time, I don't know if there was something that triggered that time frame or what, but it seemed like at the very beginning I got on, and there was, like Curtis says, there wasn't a lot of new hardware or whatnot. I think that CoCo SDC was, Ed had just maybe brought out the first run of them or something. But then all of a sudden it just seemed like there was some, every week there'd be a little bit more interest and a little bit more interest and a little bit more interest. And then the next time I came to CoCo Fest that next year, it was pleasantly full. I would say that main area was pleasantly full. And then of course, the next year I came back, and those kind of things spur you to come back, right? Like, ooh, hey, it's growing. I'll come back and see what happens next year.
Mm-hmm.
And then, 2017 it came back, and it was there, and I think there was stuff on the outside or in the other room. And then 18, it was all packed in the main room, and there was a whole bunch of people set up in that side room. And then, of course, this last year, the same kind of thing is turned on. Everybody's kind of crammed in a little bit. And of course, now, the CoCo Fest is going to be moving to a new venue, which is even larger.
Right.
It's great to hear that. And so that's kind of the end of the story. I mean, as far as, what I've seen kind of moving through, I was kind of concerned when I first showed up. I think it was 2015, because the people who were there were excited to be there, but there just wasn't a lot of people there. And as much as it's nice to have the opportunity to get together and think of this like a reunion type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
You don't want it to be completely like a reunion, whereas people quit coming because they either get too old to make the trip, or they are no longer around, you need to have more, you need to have a sustained influx of interest into the community. Not only that, but if the new ideas, you'll go to the show and you're like, oh, wow, that's a really cool idea. And then you do a riff on that idea or whatever from a hardware or software perspective. So I've been pleasantly, surprised. I've picked up a bunch more of the machines. Initially, I didn't know much about the platform. I was interested in it from just academic perspective, but didn't really know anybody in the community. It's nice that, unlike you, Steve, and some of the other folks who are quite a ways away, Chicago's kind of in my backyard, and so the hurdle or the bar to attend CoCo Fest is pretty much non-existent. I mean, it's a 3-hour drive and I'm there, so that's nice. But you even if it's just a 3-hour drive, you don't want to go to a space like that if there continues to be fewer and fewer people to kind of keep the flame alive. As far as the community as a whole, I think, Discord has been a great thing. I've been on IRC for years and years and years, but chat can suck up a major amount of your day if you're not careful. And the problem is with some of the older chat type technologies, you didn't really know if people were trying to get a hold of you or they were just generally talking about various topics or whatnot. So having a kind of a chat thing like that, but a place where people can private message you and say, hey, when you see this, I got a question about this or that or whatever. It's nice. I know Facebook has the same kind of things, but oh my goodness, I get lost in all the spaces and nooks and crannies of Facebook trying to help answer questions and message people.
The other nice thing about Discord too is you can share like photos and images and screens and stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that, and I've encouraged. The interesting thing is, and I know you guys will love to crow about this, but the CoCo Discord community seems to be extremely vibrant and large. The other communities that I'm involved with they don't seem to have that cohesive day-to-day communication vehicle that they're taking advantage of. There's still some Usenet folks, and there's still some folks on IRC. I'm on a couple IRC channels for various platforms and whatnot, but there's just not a lot of it. Seems kind of dead. And I think for somebody, what I'm really thinking, and the reason I bring it up is that we all kind of maybe have a better idea of how the community is doing on a week by week, month by month basis. But if you have somebody that goes to a garage sale and they pick up a CoCo and they're like, oh, hey, I'm kind of technically inclined or electronically inclined and I want to kind of play around with this, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to Google and they're going to go search and see, is there anybody else that I can talk to about this? Is there a community that I can join to play around with this? And if they go to, and the community says, oh yeah, we have a Discord channel, come to our Discord channel. And if they go to the channel and there's nobody saying anything or doing anything or anything like that for an extended period of time, I think they get the perception of, well, evidently this thing's dead. I'll go throw it in the trash and I'll do something else. So I think there's a marketing or public relations thing that I know people don't want to really think about, but it's probably part of it to say, yes, we're still here. We're still doing cool things. Come and join us.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, Stevie, I put a link in the chat here in Zoom to Alan Huffman's CoCo Fest archive photo site if you want to take a look at some fests from '97 on.
Wow. Okay, we'll hold on to that. But yeah, let's. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there in the chat for everybody else to see too. But rather than just sucking up a lot of time with that, I'd like to get a few more people to maybe chime in on that, and then maybe we can move on to some news and stuff.
I just figured if you wanted to, you could just go through the photos while other people are speaking.
Okay, yeah, not a bad idea. I mean, how are we doing on this topic? And Bill Noble has joined us. Hey, Bill, how's it going?
Hello.
Speaking of
not too bad.
Nitrous 9, another person responsible for that. So
he's been to a few fests too.
He's been to a few fests. We've been talking about the evolution of the community. You got some experiences you want to share, Bill, and the glory days versus the modern days?
Well, actually, Curtis has pretty much covered most of it already.
Well,
Way to cop out, Bill.
well, you missed a good discussion earlier too from Airturk, who's working on some Arduino stuff with 6809s and stuff, and you're kind of like on the hardware side of stuff too, Bill. So
actually, I actually did experiment with Airturk's stuff earlier. I'm gonna have to listen to that replay.
Yeah. So since you're kind of like you're kind of on both sides of the fence on the hardware development and software development side, what maybe what are some takeaways that you've experienced over the past couple of years that we got going on now that maybe we didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, especially like on the all the hardware emulation stuff,
Oh, well, actually, I've been experimenting with this Teensy Duino 3.6 with Mark's board that actually interfaces to the CoCo. And I've been kind of seeing if that it is actually really working well. But it's deciding between whether I have to use the Arduino IDE or pure C. Because the Teensy Duino, you can actually do a full development in pure C++.
Okay. Can you translate that to English for some of us who don't necessarily...
It's basically taking the Teensy Duino and putting it directly on the CoCo 3 bus.
Okay. So you're talking to an Arduino through... You're directly talking to it through the CoCo.
Yeah, through a specific address.
Okay. Yeah.
And that'll, of course, open up USB, real-time clocks, all kinds of other things from what I found out about this thing.
You had me at real-time clocks.
Man.
Probably most of the people on the panel.
Okay,
Hey,
so...
Bill, what was the name of the platform?
It's Teensy Duino. It's actually a microcontroller put out by, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's at www.pjrc.com/.
Oh, okay, yeah, Teensy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a fairly cheap microcontroller as well. And so far, I'm actually getting somewhere with it.
Yeah, I'm looking through the slideshow right now from 2013 from Alan Huffman's photo gallery. And you see some familiar faces. So you got to figure 2013 was what now, 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, I even saw a picture of the infamous elevator.
Yeah. So when we go back to where the hell is it? Group photos, right? So this is from so here I recognize that's Bob Swoger right there. There's Boise. There's John Mark Mobley. I'm not sure who's carrying the chair right now. Is that
That's
Gary?
George in the back, isn't it?
Okay.
Right there.
So yeah, so you talk about your usual suspects from the Glenside crowd, right? So I think that's Mark Marlette right there from Cloud9. Yeah. There's Chris Hawks, right? So some of the people you can kind of recognize. There's Chris Hawks and his wife. Yeah, there's William Astle. William Astle right there. So yeah, William. This is still at Heron Point, so we've been touching the Heron for quite some time right now, right? So there's John Strong doing the group photo, the surprise, right? So who do we see here? I mean, there's George. There's Mark Marlette in the background. Yep, kind of the pictures are kind of small, but yeah, there's Jim O'Keefe. There's is that Wally, front and center? Okay, there's Wally. George, yeah. So I mean, you talk about some of your diehards who have been keeping the Glenside. That's a good group photo there. I wish you can get a little bit bigger, picking up on there. Yeah. So this is 2013. So this was even a little bit before. There's John and Neil in the background there. Yeah. So this is right before the time that Jim Brain was talking about. This one actually looks halfway decent turnout. So maybe a year or two later is when we want to start to die off a little bit. So this was 2013.
Well, I was going to mention the group photo they had out front. If you remember the group photo we took, the 2015 one, I think we were quite a bit larger by that time. Right?
Oh yeah. So this was the most one of the most recent ones prior to obviously the ones that we've all been attending for the past few years. So yeah, this is a great archive from Alan Huffman. So we did put the link out there. So he's got the Atlanta Fest, Chicago from 1997, 1998. Yeah, so great little slices of history right there. Yeah, good stuff. Good. So, anybody else want to chime in on the topic of the community, where it's been, where it's going, or have we beat this one to death? Anybody else want to get in on some input and your experiences being in the community, even if you're
especially from the people that have just been kind of getting back to CoCo the last couple of years,
new to the community? Yeah, Joe Burnett.
Hey, kind of what I wanted to mention. Excuse me. I've been here months, just a matter of months, not years like some of the others. And how I happened upon the group, I'm members of some of the vintage computing groups on Facebook. And again, I think I mentioned before, I had more of an Apple II 6502 background, but I had a really good friend growing up who had a CoCo, and we spent a lot of time on that. And so I just happened across the TRS-80 Color Computer Facebook group, joined it, started reading. And, I think the thing I want to mention, as far as encouraging and letting everyone know, it is encouraging that there will be more people come along. I never owned one, but I was familiar with it and still interested in it, along with the vintage computing. But this community, even though it may be smaller, because you go out and you look at some of the Commodore groups, you look at the Apple II groups, seems like it's a lot larger, a lot more people. You tend to get lost in the conversations. And I don't even know if they do anything comparable to this. I've never even joined. But, since I started watching this group on the YouTube live stream, started making a few comments here and there. Oh, look, they mentioned my name. They said something, they acknowledged my comment, try to make, intelligent comments because of that. But yeah, I mean, you're very inclusive, and that doesn't mean, you shouldn't give people a hard time for owning an Apple, right? that comes.
We can do that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Tell Mark he's an idiot.
Where's Marco? Yeah.
That comes with the territory,
Buy a real computer, Mark.
He's got a CoCo. He's got a couple CoCos. So
he's okay.
I think the fact that you are a smaller community, and I guess more, almost like cozy, makes you the appeal is there. You feel more welcoming. I felt more welcome as an outsider. I was able to just really join in and hit the ground running. And I had watched, for months. And when the Radio Shack grand opening opened up, I'm like, okay, well, this is a chance for me to give back, because I've enjoyed the stream cast. So if it can bring me in, there even though other people may not have owned a CoCo, may not have had as much experience on the CoCo, they love the vintage computing, and that was really good that popped up on Facebook and caught my interest, and I decided to come over and join. So
cool. Well, we're glad you did. Yeah.
And one thing, Joe, I think that you've kind of hit on, and I think Stevie's mentioned in the past before too, is that the CoCo community, we were always an underdog. We weren't the mainstream. And I think that made our community a bit more close-knit because we kind of had to defend ourselves as a whole, even back in the glory days, because we were getting outsold by Commodores and Apples and everything else too. And I think in the current situation in the retro computing community, that hasn't changed. We're still like the minority stakeholder in the retro community, but we tend to defend ourselves and defend each other, I think, more so than some of these much larger groups where it's a nostalgia that, you might have played games or something on it, but it didn't really have that as special of a meaning as it did for us.
I think you guys both are mentioning, and obviously it's no secret that I enjoy Commodore machines as well. But after being on, watching CoCoTALK and being on Discord and doing these things, I thought, well, you know what, I Discord organically went into those, so I'll kind of retrofit and see what comparable things there are in the Commodore community. And I think we talked about this maybe at another show, but it doesn't seem like there's something like this that is dedicated to some of the other platforms. I mean, Steve does Retro Talk, and that's kind of a all-encompassing thing for retro-based machines. But what I found out there was a lot of people talking, especially in the Commodore platform, for instance, a lot of their newscasts or video segments or whatever are mainly like, hey, watch me play Montezuma's Revenge, or let's talk about the awesomeness that was the Donkey Kong version that ran on the Commodore 64. And I'm sure that's great. I'm sure there's a ton of people that are really excited about that. I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed my computer back in the day, not for games. I always was interested in hooking it up to stuff and learning how to write my own programs to help with making me lazy at math or whatever. And so I didn't play a ton of games. And so nowadays that's just not a big thing. And maybe that's where the focus is for a number of the other platforms, is just, hey, how many cool games can I play on the machine? And for those people who are more interested in the kind of the overall machine and all the stuff that it can do, there may not be anything comparable to these types of things in the other platforms. So I guess that's a benefit to being part of this community.
Yeah, and I think we have a pretty good balance, because we do have the game playing people too. Like Stevie's one of them. I mean, that's the whole reason he got into it, and he's doing video game reviews of CoCo stuff too. And that's
I don't hold that against him too much.
Well, I know
that guy from the UK, plays games poorly as he advertises. And,
back in the day, I played a lot of games, but I also did a lot of basic programming and fiddled around with assembler and a couple other languages. I know one of the reasons I got back into it was the games, because I really did miss those. They were a big part of my how I spent my teen years. So like I said, I found Stevie and other people playing CoCo games online, which got me back into it. And then I watched I took part of the YouTube stream. I made comments and stuff. And one day Stevie's like, "Oh, you should jump on Zoom." And I'm like, thinking to myself, what? I'm not a podcaster. Why do you want?
Neither are any of us. So
I was just really impressed with how inclusive and welcoming this community was, in terms of, come on in. Yeah, everybody has a story to tell.
Oh yeah.
We all have different perspectives. We all have different things to add, and it's you guys have become really good friends, and it really is a big part of my what I enjoy. So.
Yeah. The diversity of the community, I think, is probably one of our biggest strong points, as well as the encompassing welcome to everybody, no matter what part of the CoCo array of things you're into. I mean, we can go from having a game special like we did the Dino game last week, to having Urtuk on today to talk about a hardware project using the 6809. I mean, we can go all over the place. There's a ton of stuff that you can be interested in, and you'll find something you like within the next couple episodes, no matter what your niche is.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Go ahead.
Add a couple of things. Like, this is the first time I am involved in several different communities like this, but this is the first one that had a video, and I think that brings up a different aspect. Like, it's more personal. I get to see who's talking, and I hear stories and things like that. But on an email or even like chats, like, things happen so fast, or gets lost in all this like text stuff in here, and even though this is my first time I'm joining, like, I'm in the back of my mind, I will come back here again. Like, actually, if I was looking at installing on my phone, that even if I can't be sitting here, and I listen to it in the background, and don't miss this stuff.
Yeah, that's great. You're definitely welcome.
I agree with that. I do that a lot, because you're right. It does make it more personal. It feels like you've connected to somebody. It's like you get your weekly dose of, hey, there's a bunch of other people out that are like me, so I'm not that weird.
Yeah.
Well, in your case, I think it's more like, look at all these people I control.
Yeah. Well, I know early on that the term CoCo Fest Blues was mentioned a lot, and was kind of a thing because we weren't as connected. Even as the things started to snowball, we got to, the CoCo Fest 2016 was probably one of the first, kind of Renaissance ones where the CoCo crew and Facebook and everybody got together and put a spotlight on the community. But then we started talking about right after that, well, now we have the CoCo Fest Blues, right? Where, well, we got together. It was great. It was euphoric. All these endorphins going on, but now we're starting to crash, right? So now we're coming back down. Now we have to wait a whole nother year to see each other. And I think for even the first maybe 2 years of this 5-year resurgence, that was probably true. But I think now, like, again, because we're doing this on a week, this show was kind of a fluke. And it just, let's talk about CoCo Fest. It's fun. We're excited. And it just managed to continue. And I think the reason why it has continued is for everything you guys are saying about the community. We're diverse. We're a cross section. We've got hardcore hardware people. We got hardcore software people. We've got living legends. We've got people who've been there from day one. We got newbies. It's a melting pot. The community is, and the people who the revolving door of this panel are all kind of that cross section of who we are, and the fact that we're able to get together is making us feel more connected and more tangible as far as the whole community aspect of that. And I think that's been the success of while we're still here 123 episodes later, is because we got something to talk about. We got a reason to get together. Even if we got nothing to talk about, we got a reason to get together. Like I echoed what Nick Marotta said. I mean, honestly, maybe it sounds sad, but this is kind of a highlight of my week to get together because, I got a whole week of adulting to do. I got all kinds of serious shit to deal with on a daily basis. It's nice for 2 to 3 hours to not have to worry about all of your other responsibilities in the world and just focus on something else. So, I mean, I look forward to it. I'm not as active as I'd like to be with projects and being on Discord and stuff. So once a week for 3 hours or so, I get my dose, So for me, I'm much of a fan. I'm sitting here as a fan, of the community and the CoCo, just like everybody else is,
Called finding your tribe.
Yes,
It really is.
Yeah.
This or hang out at a bar.
Yeah.
This show is like a weekly computer club meeting, really, where we all get together and talk. It's interactive, just like the real thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to just reading web pages or listening to an audio blog where it's just a one-dimensional conversation. This is like the real thing. You say something, you reply. You can react straight away. If Curtis says something like OS 9 is great, well, I can get in there and say that. There is that two-way communication. It feels like the real thing.
But
Nick, you control back and forth. It's not just one-sided.
That's right.
Yeah.
But Nick, aren't you the Emmy Award-winning creator of the trash can icon in Nitro OS 9?
Hey.
That's when it finally got good, I think, is his opinion.
Yeah.
I think
what's
that
brought it up. Yeah.
I think that is very profound because I do remember that was one of the things I really missed when, back in the 80s when we all had our various platforms and there was a monthly computer meeting. That was the highlight. I mean, most of us were probably teenagers or in middle school or whatnot. And that was like the highlight of the month was going and being able to converse with other people. And after, and Curtis mentioned earlier in the other segment about, networks and FidoNet and whatnot, I did that as well. But just that voice and kind of face-to-face or virtual face-to-face interaction was lacking in that type of thing. And you just don't realize you miss it until you can find it again. And you're like, crap, I really enjoyed having that connection with people. And it's back again, and that really helps out my mental state.
Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, there are a lot of perks and pluses to the live and interactive format, but there's also something good too about the pre-recorded podcast too, because you can listen to it. It's still got the information. It lacks some of the interactivity, or it lacks pretty much all of the interactivity, but it's still still a valid source of content and consumable stuff to listen to, especially it's great for commuting and things like that. So let's not write that off, right? So, and then this is great, and this is one of a few great mediums and resources we have as far as broadcasting and content and stuff like that. So, but yeah, definitely.
Radio star. So.
I definitely enjoy it. I mean, I think I think one of the things you guys mentioned, you felt welcomed. I mean, I definitely felt welcome. Like when I was starting to do YouTube videos, I had a lot of people commenting on the YouTube videos, and that's kind of how I met Curtis and getting some information and being being pointed towards the resources like, at that time, the Google Plus page and things like that. And there's a few things, and I mean, we're already going on 3 hours, so I'm not sure how much more we want to beat this episode. I do want to get into the Delphi thing. Maybe we won't cover all the news, but some of the stuff we had in the news was we get people all the time that have just joined Facebook and have all these questions. How do I get a floppy drive? How can I do this? How can I do that? And I was that same person, like all of us say, when you get that first CoCo in a garage sale and you go to Google, where do you go? And just to toot my horn for 1 second, the one thing I tried to do was to create that resource, which is, I'll plug that website, imacoconut.com, imacoconut.com, because I did that for me, because I was trying to keep track of everything. Rather than trying to remember how to bookmark everything and not forget, I just started putting stuff on a page. I created a page of links of places to go, and then that page has kind of grown and it became a website, just to try to make it more. I'm not a webmaster, so it's not the best, but it's slightly organized as a resource. So, because it becomes a voyage of discovery, right? Well, I've just discovered this and I've just discovered that. And so I kind of wanted to document and compile that information. And it's fairly up to date, but it could always use some tweaks. So if you're new to the community, that's one place to go that will point you to the variety of resources, like the CoCo Crew podcast and the Facebook page and other people's blog sites and the Color Computer mailing list and all that kind of stuff. There's a ton of stuff out there. It can almost be overwhelming. For us being an underdog, there is an overwhelming amount of resources out there. How do you make sense of it?
As a longtime user of various 8-bit micros, I don't mind helping new people that come into the hobby, that picked up a CoCo at a yard sale or a flea market or wherever they manage, or got one guy's girlfriend's uncle gave him a whole bunch of CoCo stuff. I don't mind helping people like that, because that's where I get pleasure out of helping people get the most out of their computer.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's fun.
Yeah. Speaking of a guy who's got a history going way back, we have Al Hartman from Jersey, everybody. Al Hartman's here.
Oh, yeah. I first started in 1978 with a TRS-80 Model 1.
When you were a spry 2 years old, right?
Yes, when I was a spry 2 years old.
I still appreciate Nick and Curtis walking me and mocking me through my 12K upgrade. So,
yeah, I mean, we could sit here and wax nostalgic forever, but yeah, I think it was good. It was a good idea just to say, and I know earlier Mark Overholzer quoted something where saying basically there's nothing new under the sun. You're going to see patterns. You're going to see camps and fanboys. You might see divides. You might see factions. These things will probably rise and fall and ebb and flow, but I think the common thread all along, especially when you look at a great resource like Glenside Color Computer Club, you've got this core group of people who are passionate about this computer and about this community and have just kept it alive and kept it going. So if I was to say, if you're looking for a role model for the color computer community, try to be like Glenside. It's a great group of people. Great group of people who have just kind of gotten together and kept this alive. And, they have the annual migration of CoCo Fest. They've got the picnics. They've got a real club with real people that meet on a monthly basis that have been doing this for 29 years. That's amazing. All right. So
they helped organize Rainbow Fest before that too, with Rainbow Magazine. So they've actually been doing it a lot longer than that.
Yeah. So, if there's anything that you could say is encapsulating what a great spirit of the community should be, it's the Glenside Color Computer Club and CoCo Fest, right?
And it's the welcoming nature of the community. I'm part of various micro communities, and a lot of them, they tell new people they're RTFM.
Read the fine manual, right?
So, yeah, read the fine manual.
Yeah.
They don't help. They make fun of you if you don't know certain things.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone ever doing that in the CoCo community.
Well, a lot of people make fun of me for not getting past level 1. So,
that's different.
Yeah, we do praise you on the rare occasion you do.
All right. How about we're gonna stop singing Kumbaya now, and we're gonna move on. Are we ready to move on?
Yes, I just recommend all new game manufacturers start at level 2. So
do we have any predictions before we move on? Before we put this to bed, do we have predictions based on what we've seen in the past 5 years? There's been so many things that we not would have. I never would have expected this show to last this long. I never would have expected to see a brand new keyboard and the Mega Mini MPI and now Sound Wars. And,
well, Nick and I were talking in the chat, Nick Marotta and I, and one prediction I'll make, and I've heard him say this kind of privately, is that Ed definitely plans to make a CoCo 3 or CoCo 3 Plus clone at some point.
A CoCo replacement.
A CoCo replacement, and that's going to revitalize the community
because now you can literally buy a brand new CoCo.
There'll be new machines coming in that will have modern features that you can hook into modern monitors. They'll use SD cards. They'll have better sound. There'll be a machine that's attractive to new, younger users.
Okay.
But will still have the attraction to us old farts.
Okay.
Who want to use our old stuff and want to use OS 9 level 2 and Nitrous 9, and that's what's going to bring in new users. Nick and I were talking about the Commodore Mini and now the Maxi that's coming out in 9.
Starting to sound
Commodore
like
64.
Feminine products there for not.
Yeah, but basically a whole new Commodore 64 from the ground up coming out in December, and that brings in a lot of new Commodore people. And I think if eventually we get to a new CoCo clone, that's going to revitalize the community, and we're going to see a lot more new people interested in the system.
Right.
Into the community.
And so let me ask you this real quick, and I don't want to drag this on too long, but you just touch on something. So a new CoCo clone. We've already got 2 or 3 CoCo clones right now between the FPGA, the Matchbox, and the Mister. So what do you think is going to make this one different and more attractive? Because it's more real hardware, real computer based versus a little magic box.
Yeah, I think you'll need less. There's less of a barrier to. The Commodore 64 Mini has less of a barrier to entry than getting a Raspberry Pi and running a Commodore 64 emulator on it.
You just turn it on. It's more hardware-ish.
Well, yeah, you don't have to be a computer guru. I mean, I have not gotten into any of the FPGA type clones because it just takes so much knowledge to get them up and running. I mean, I read all the time of people, if you program the flash with this switch not set, it's not going to work. And my system booted yesterday, it's not booting today. I don't want that. I want something like my CoCo 3 that turns on, it works, and I never have to really worry about it. You know?
Okay.
And
so you think like a CoCo 3.5, which has now got the Gimme X and more memory and all these things and the
sound chip,
all that stuff built in, and you just turn it on and we boot up and we now have this new modern CoCo. I don't disagree that would be great for new fans and olds, but do you think that would take us to a whole nother level than where we are now, how we've had this kind of gradual but consistent growth? Do you think we would, if we were to graph this, we would spike at that point?
People like Nick Marentis will write games for that new platform.
I don't know about that guy. He's a little flaky.
Well, he may not write an OS 9 game.
And he talks funny.
Yeah.
Well, yes, he does talk funny. But he would love to have a sound chip. He would love to have a system with a sound chip. And the Gimme X is going to introduce new video modes that Nick would love to program to. And then you'll see other game developers jumping in.
Well, like we just
more capable machine.
I don't know if we reported this last week, but the CoCo VGA has sold 100 units. So there's a market now for the CoCo VGA, right?
Yeah,
which has got an extra modes, right? 64 column modes, programmable character. I'm interested in the CoCo VGA, but I'd actually have to commit to doing something. But
I keep missing out on the TDP 100s, but I have an old TDP 100.
Yeah.
That's like this old house. I have to rebuild it from scratch.
Yeah.
And definitely one of the things I'm going to put into it is a CoCo VGA.
There we go. So predictions would be a brand new brand new CoCo you can buy with new hardware, but it's got all the compatibility of the old and some forward facing stuff. That's a great prediction. I don't think that's far past the realm of achievability either. Just noting the track record of our hardware.
All the parts are almost, once the Gimme X is done, all the parts are in place.
Yeah.
And then all that's left is to design a new logic board with all the other supporting components.
Yeah, we're almost there. And a case. That's going to be kind of expensive to make a case, right? Unless there's one that already exists, right? So, as far as like 3D printing or injection molding, that could be a barrier. But it's
I would love to see an existing case adapted, like a mini ATX or something.
Or even like a laptop or something, you know. A lot of options there. Yeah. All right. We're going to put a fork in this topic, but we can continue this topic on Discord, in the Facebook group, all kinds of places. So we have these conversations all the time, which is great. Cool. We're going to get into some news in just a second here. So we're going to take another commercial break, and then we're going to get into some news, and then we'll get into some. And because the show's running long, I want to lead into the news with the Delphi project from Rick, because Rick is still here and he's been very gracious to stay awake this whole time for us. So we haven't put him to sleep.
Stevie, I've actually got a hard out here in about 10-15 minutes.
Okay. All right.
So until next week, we can do that.
Yeah. All right. So then we're gonna close on Delphi then, and we'll save the news for next week. And now another thing too, just a little behind the scenes stuff. We're trying to get a few more people set up to stream the show as a backup. So Mark Bosley has been pretty much the primary, but we got a few guys in the wings who are trying to get set up. So maybe tonight we'll do a test after dark stream to get a few other people set up to broadcast the show, and maybe we can do some more stuff then tonight. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. I definitely want to talk about the Delphi, because that kind of piggybacks on the Chet Simpson thing that we talked about last week in the news, and now we're seeing a front end to the back end. So speaking of new hardware, how about a little bit of a switcheroo, one of the leading new hardware products. We're going to run a switcheroo commercial, and then we'll be back.
Hey, this is Bruce Moore, author of Force of Doom, and you're watching the original gamer Stevie Stroh.
Only the bravest souls enter. Only the most cunning return. Defeat innumerable monsters to ransom the king's scepter, stolen by the evil wizard. Your sword, shield, and wits are your only allies. Pray you find a magical inn as your only respite in the forest of doom.
For the tiny color computer 1, 2, and 3.
November 2017. If you dare.
It's a Radio Shack Merry Christmas.
Oh, I remember that Christmas. Dad gave me my first shortwave radio from Radio Shack. What memories. This Christmas, we got our son's Color Computer 3 from Radio Shack. It hooks right up to our TV and was on sale for less than $130. The Color Computer 3 makes learning fun. Jimmy even lets me use it for word process when he isn't playing computer games. Lucky I still got my shortwave.
Save $70 on the sale-priced Color Computer 3, only at Radio Shack.
Hi, it's Ron Delvo, Timberman, and this is CoCoTALK.
In a world where RGB produces black and white video, one cable can make a difference. Switcheroo. CoCo3ScartCable.com.
Some people have big plans after school. You know what Elliot's going to do? Jeff, too. Elliot's at work on a book report using Scripsit on Radio Shack's Color Computer 3. It hooks up to his TV. And Jeff's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3 playing the newest football game. But wait, what's Elliot doing playing New Super Pitfall? And Jeff's having a blast with a new math tutor. You never know what you might try with more than 100 programs for fun and learning. Radio Shack's Color Computer 3 comes with everything you see here. Other items each sold separately. Only at Radio Shack.
We now return you to CoCoTALK.
All right, and we are back, everyone. So what we're going to do, because we are already now at 3 hours. 3 hours. Imagine that, right? We've been sitting here just singing Kumbaya for so long, saying how great life is in the CoCo community. Now, everybody should join it. You should all be a coconut. I'm a coconut. He's a coconut. She's a coconut. We're a coconut. Wouldn't you like to be a coconut too? All right. But we're done patting our backs, and we're now just going to talk about, we had a lot of news to talk about, but we're going to just talk about one right now. And since we have Mr. Thank You, You're Too Kind here with us, he has started on another project, which I think is pretty cool, and I'm interested in seeing because I missed out on the Delphi days. So before I bring it up on the big screen, Rick, do you want to just start off by explaining what this project is? And we have a Discord channel for it too. We'll talk about Discord. We'll plug Discord. So tell us what we're about to embark upon here.
Okay. Well, as you saw last week, I believe, Chet Simpson had shared that database of all of those old Delphi messages that got dumped off just before they pulled the plug. I'm not sure what his role in that was. If he super took the existing data and buffed it up quite a bit, or he buffed it up a little bit, or he just passed it on. I've asked him about that and he hasn't answered me yet. So I'm not sure what his role was, but definitely he has passed that on to us. So I took that and I put that in a database on my web host, and I made a web interface for it, which is sort of in the very beginning phases. And it's done in a very retro way, and I'm trying to sort of reproduce the experience in all its fantastic frustration of being logged on to glory. The 300 baud experience.
Yeah.
Back in the days when your terminal program, what color did you have on the screen? Well, you had, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was green. And maybe you've got the raster lines.
Yeah.
I've made it look like you're looking at Delphi logging on with a CM8 monitor. I haven't decided whether or not the door is going to be broken yet or not.
So I'll pull it up in just a second. I just wanted to say too, just sort of to put a little bit of context here too. So when we first interviewed you a couple of years ago, you were our first big celebrity interview. You had told us, you had a website dedicated to the Colossal Cave Adventure. That you were a fan of that, and then the folks from AMC who made that series Halt and Catch Fire, they had found you, they reached out to you, and you ended up creating for them and their website a similar thing where you have this kind of vintage wrapped experience where you could play the Colossal Cave like you were on an old terminal. And so you're now doing that for Delphi, for the Delphi archive that's recently been made available for us, right? And so that's kind of what we're doing here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring it up full screen, and I'm going to refresh the page, because when you first come to this page, it's a very slow, like you say, in all of its frustratingness and all its frustrating glory. So it's kind of a slow burn when you first do it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh, and here we go. So now we are connected to Falsoft's Color Computer Special Interest Group. Group manager Marty Goodman, database manager Rick Adams, and it's just going by so fast. Learn how to use
throw in
this.
any random disconnects or
nice no carrier.
No carrier detected.
Yeah.
I've got to disconnect you every once, like every 5 minutes, disconnect you with a couple of random characters and then no carrier.
Yeah. Okay, so we're here. I've never used Delphi. What do I do?
Well, what you can do is just hit return to get to the next message.
Okay.
So you can try that.
Okay.
I've added a little bit of navigation, not very much.
Okay, so this is August.
All you can do.
August of 85.
All you can do right now is you can type in the number of the message that you want to read.
Okay.
But a lot of the messages are missing, so you might type in a number that doesn't exist. in which case it'll just go to the next one. Or you can type in any other string, and it will show you the next message that has that string in it. So if you typed in, if you typed in Rick Adams, it would show you the first message from me.
Okay, so this was you entered on July 27th of 1986 from Rick Adams. Well, here I am at last. I'm Rick Adams, and I'm extremely glad to be here. I'm a systems programmer who writes CoCo games as a hobby. Like Temple of Ram, for example, I've also have moderate hardware experience. It'll take me a while to figure this system out, but when I do, I'll see if I can't supply a few uploads. I'm here because the one local CoCo board here folded a while ago, and I missed the fun and interaction of the CoCo users. P.S. Hey, don't knock Dino Wars. It was the game that convinced me that I could make a little money writing for Tandy, since it was obviously that they needed help.
I like Dino Wars.
I like Dino Wars too. So there are a few Dino War fans here. So that's great. So that was your first post.
Yeah.
So we could search for things like that. Curtis Boyle, were you on Delphi?
I did very briefly until I got my first build.
And what was your name? What was your Delphi name? L Mullet?
Probably just Curtis Boyle. I didn't do the handle thing, but I don't know if it's
okay.
I was on very briefly, so.
Okay, here's general information from Wanda and Midnight from Marty Goodman to all. Okay, so
it's all about him seeing a movie. It looks like.
Okay. I love the slow loading of this. So was Delphi kind of like an ANSI terminal type thing where you had these top and bottom lines that didn't scroll?
No. It wasn't like that at all. It's just that's how I had it programmed for the other project that I did. So
Okay.
I just kept it.
Okay.
Rick, was it you that did Delphi term?
Yeah.
And what special features did you add to that compared to a standard terminal program?
Oh boy, I don't remember. It had macro capacity. You could do like you can automate your sign-on. You can automate a number of things. You upload, obviously. I don't remember all the things that it could do. I kept adding features to it, and Marty Goodman would say, I would use Delphi term if it just had this feature. And so I would add that feature. And then Marty Goodman would say, that's pretty good. I would use Delphi term.
Feature creep, huh?
Yeah. And eventually I gave up.
Okay, so Dave Phillipson. We're going to search for Dave Phillipson. So it's D. Phillipson. DPHILIPSEN.
There's something fascinating about reading these old messages.
Yeah, it's like being a voyeur into the past,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Dave Phillipson to all. For sale, I have 4 brand new 128K color computer 3s, still in original boxes with manuals, cables, etc. These computers are leftovers from a mass quantity I made for a special project. I will sell them for $60 each.
Oh.
Holy crap.
Hey, what year was
that? That was in 2002.
Yeah, it's $2,002.
Hey, Dave, you still got one of those CoCos? I'll give you 70. 75. Final offer.
Send an email to Delphi on Delphi.
Yeah. And so the underscore star underscore, that's the beginning and end of a message. Is that like a footer or an indicator?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what it looked like. And so I have my Delphi handbook, which has all the commands that were used.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to replicate, those commands. I'm almost certainly not going to add the add and reply commands, which would enable you to leave new messages or reply to existing ones.
You can start a new flame war.
Yeah, that might open a can of worms. So.
CompuServe's way better, man. That's what I'd be putting in. No, I'm just
what was Dale Lear's handle? I want to look for a Dale Lear post in here. Is it just
Dale Lear, all one word?
I tried that. DALELEAR, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Post not found.
Try. You had double E in there.
DAL.
Try it again. E.
L.
LEAR. AR. Yeah.
Post not found.
Oh, come on.
Am I doing something wrong?
Well, you did say not all the messages made it in, right?
Well, there are some by him. So
Okay.
do a 1 to get to the beginning again.
Oh, okay. So from the top of the list.
And then, and then while that's doing that thing, just type in Dale Lear, and it can be lowercase if you want.
Okay, archives. Dale Lair, 2P shooter. Okay, so it looks like July 19th of 86. Okay, so here's...
You notice he's talking about OS 9 too, right?
Okay. This is my first time on the SIG, but I think this is a question I can answer. There are many similarities between Unix and OS 9. OS 9 was modeled after Unix. For instance, at the shell level, most of the bread and butter Unix commands have direct OS 9 counterparts: cat, cd, print working directory, chmod, the Michael Jackson command, chmod, echo, date. Yeah, cool. Also the TSN.
Can you add the sound of the modem connecting?
That
would be really cool.
And even though technically the text never made noise when it was being put on the screen, most TV shows tend to play some type of audio of the the sound of the characters being put on the screen.
Some of our terminal programs did that too. So
No, that's cool. So this is really cool. This is a really cool way to just kind of be a voyeur into the past and talking about the history of the CoCo and the community. This was a big part of it that I missed. So, if you have nothing better to do on a Saturday, you could sit here and read, some CoCo Delphi stuff, right? So that's cool. And so it is delphi.rickadams.org. And we've been talking about Discord. So I'll just pull up Discord here real quick. But this is what Discord looks like. We have voice channels. We've got general channels. We've got down here so there's a brand new under projects. There's a brand new channel for the CoCo Rick Adams CoCoSig-rickadams.org. So there's a new channel here. We've got a channel for emulators. We've got a channel for DriveWire for people who want to talk about DriveWire. We've got buy, sell, and trade, people selling stuff. We've got hardware discussions. And we recently just had CoCoCat, who is actually Atari. What was his name? I don't remember what his name used to be. But yeah, it was Atari something, right? So not Atari Leaf, but Atari Vision. Yeah, so Atari Vision is a guy I knew about a couple years ago by doing YouTube stuff. He actually just walked in on one of my live streams, and I pointed him here. So he started asking some questions about the artifact colors being off. So he posted some pictures of what it's looking like, and people have pointed him in the right direction on where to go to fix these problems, right? So so Discord is a great place to come, where you have text channels, you got voice channels. There's it's kind of like an IRC thing, it's kind of like a Skype thing. It's a little bit of everything. So check out Discord, and that's just another extension of the current CoCo community, right? So there are a lot of resources, right? So I mean, and they all have their pros and cons, right? So there is the Facebook is great, but it's hard to search. There is the CoCo mailing list, which is good, but it's a little bit techy. So there's lots of different ways to communicate, but I think Discord is becoming the new norm when it comes to getting information in a bit. And nobody really owns it. So nobody's making any money off of this. None of us here are benefiting from this financially. It's really just a community resource for you to take it or leave it. Cool. So, dude, we've been doing this now for how long?
3.5 hours.
Coming on 3.5 hours. So as much as I'd say this could go on forever, a lot of us have a hard out, and 3.5 hours is probably enough show for 1 week. Always leave them wanting more, right? So maybe some more tonight, definitely some more next week. If you have nothing better to do on a Saturday, maybe you'll join us next week. I don't know what else to say, but parting thoughts. L. Curtis Boyle, member of the community. We haven't revoked your card, so you're
Well, I've still got another week or two of overtime and stuff at work. It's died down a little bit enough that I could come on the show, but once that's finished by the third week of September here, I'll be back on the Ease of Use Beta 5, where I've got a whole bunch of new icons. So apparently I have to get all these games ready to run. Bob and Nick have made a ton of them. And some other stuff I want to sneak in there too. So I'll be getting back to work on that. I don't have a release date yet because I've got to kind of remember where the heck I left off.
Okay. Very cool. Rick Adams, parting thoughts?
I don't have any.
Okay, there you go. Good enough. Joe Burnett, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom?
Yeah, that was a great presentation about the project with the Arduino and interfacing with the older processors. And I'm always trying to look for ways or projects to encourage the next generation to come in and enjoy the love of assembly language programming, things like that. So thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Very good. Nick Marotta playing Temple of Rom in the background there, representing.
I almost became the I love you guys guy today, but I was able to stay strong.
I love you guys, man. We love you too.
I love you guys.
We love you too, man. That's good. Bill Noble. We're wrapping up, Bill. Any parting thoughts? Anything you want to tell us about what's going on in your world that we need to know about?
Not too much, no. I'm just revamping the database for the ease of use boot editor.
Yeah. Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us towards the tail end of the show. Always a pleasure to have you here, Bill. Al Hartman from Jersey. Parting thoughts. All right. We'll take that as a no. All right. We can barely hear you there, Al.
This is the best I got right now, because I put my headset away. My only parting thought is I hope everyone who's in the path of the hurricane is safe.
Yep.
Through the next few days without a problem.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Us on the East Coast, especially in the Southeast, we're got our fingers crossed right now. Very, very cool. Nick Marentes, we talked about your favorite subject today, hardware. You're a big fan of hardware, especially hardware that may or may not be supported by anyone.
OS9.
And OS 9. We talked about OS 9 too, one of your other favorite topics.
Yeah. It's all fun here. So much to do on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah, that's about it. I'm pretty thoughtless. So.
All right. We'll give David Ladd a minute, because David, are you still with us? Or are you detached? Are you away from keyboard? Going once, David Ladd. Mark Bosley, parting thoughts?
No, I mean, this kind of discussion can go on all day, though.
I know, it's good. Right, we'll milk it next week too. We'll recap what we talked about this week next week. So never a shortage of content there. Mark D. Overholzer, kind of like me, new to the community. Any parting thoughts on the community and how your experience has been so far?
I love hearing from all the people, and I love the stories, listening to Rick Adams talk about his stuff with Dale Lear and the other people he interfaced with, and L. Curtis Boyle talking about what they did with OS 9 and how they started Nitrous 9, and Steve Bjork, all the stuff that he did, and just wow, a lot of really cool history here. So,
all right.
Especially like Rick's story when Microsoft came to visit his office.
That was a good one too.
Retro Innovations. Well, the bar was set extremely low, and the show worked incredibly hard to miss it.
Where would we be without our troll?
Oh, Lord have mercy. All right, and our special guest, Air Turk. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Hopefully it was interesting for you guys. My, first of all, this is a fun place, but my biggest takeaway is watch out what you post online, because in 30, 40 years, it may be read by a bunch of guys.
Oh, yeah.
Be read by your grandkids.
Yeah. I certainly regret all those. I was a big member of the Spice Girls fan club online, so I really hope nobody finds those posts of me. So,
which one did you like the best, Steve?
Spooky Spice was my favorite.
Spice?
Yeah, whoever that was. So, anyways, we're going to. Was that? I don't even know if that's the right name. If it was Spooky.
Scary.
Okay, I was close.
Sparky Spice or something. I don't remember.
Spunky Spice. All right. All right, so we're going to play the outro. We're going to put a fork in this episode, and we'll have final thoughts after this. This concludes another episode of CoCoTALK, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy Color Computer. For all things CoCoTALK, visit us on the web at cocotalk.live. We'd love to hear from you. Send feedback, suggestions, even segments via email to CoCoTALK at CoCoTalk.live.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
Consider supporting the show with a purchase of merchandise from our retro swag shop at 8bit256.com. If you'd like to become a patron of the show, click the Patreon link at our website at CoCoTalk.live.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
CoCoTALK would not exist without the community, its cast, crew, and contributors. Thanks go to Curtis Boyle, David Ladd, Mark Overholzer, Grant Leedy, Bruce Moore, Nick Marentes, Ron Delvaux, Rick Adams, Jason Reichert, Richard Lorbieski, Jim Brain, Tom C., Rob Inman, Mark Bosley, Brian Joyce, Ken Reichert, David O'Connor, Brian Weasler, Terry Steggy, Nick Marotta, John Strong, and many more, especially to Steve Bjork for production suggestions and James Differendaffer for making my head explode. Please help support the CoCo community by visiting some of its various contributors. A list of resources is available at imacoconut.com. That's imacoconut.com. The CoCoTALK theme song is copyright 2008 by D. Bruce Moore and Greg Sheeler. Mixed, mastered, and produced by D. Bruce Moore.
That ukulele.
That's right. That's one of our "I love you guys" moment right there when we see Nick Marotta playing that ukulele. Right. Ukulele has been the glue that's kept this community together all these years. So, and we didn't mention how of all the events and festivals we went to, how many of them involved an elevator incident. I believe right now that answer is only just one. Right. So, of the 29 consecutive CoCo Fest that we've had, only one of them has had an elevator incident. So we got that going for us.
From now on, we only use venues that are on the ground floor.
Yes. It has been zero.
Anyway, I've got to get going here, guys.
All right, guys. Yeah, we're going to press the button. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Air Turk, for being our special guest. Please come back and see us. And for the rest of us non-special folks, we hope to see you all again sometime soon, too.
Almost says I'm special.
That's right. And so does my bus driver. All right, we're going to press the button now. Take care.